I call this meeting the Siloam Springs City Board of Directors for July 7, 2020 to order. Roll call.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Would you please stand as Director Smiley leads us in our opening prayer and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Dear Heavenly Father, we are so thankful for the many blessings you have given our community and for the opportunity to serve, to come together and serve our city. We ask that you give us the ability to make wise and careful decisions that is in the best interest of our citizens, and we pray that you will watch over our community, our nation, and all of those that serve and protect us wherever they may be. In Jesus' name, amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and good evening. Looks like we've got a house full as we're allowed to have, so thank you for helping us observe the social distancing. And if there's someone who's here to see something specific and you want to leave after that's over, that's fine, because it may leave room for someone else to come back in. So they're listening out there, so if there's anybody out in the lobby that's wanting to hear something, they can get with Chief Gilbert or whoever and make sure that they're allowed in, so whenever time comes. All right. Also, at this time, I'd like to remind everyone to, if you have an electronic device, that you make sure it's silenced so that we don't have anybody's phone going off a code red or anything like that. I don't think you can silence a code red, but we want to make sure that nobody interrupts anybody while we're having our discussions. Board, you've each received a copy of the regular meeting of June 16, 2020. Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion? Being none, we will vote on the motion to approve. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Next is the workshop candidate question and answer that we had on June 18, 2020 up at the library. Do I have a motion to approve the minutes of that meeting?
So moved. Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there discussion on the motion to approve? Being none, we will vote on the motion to approve. Roll call. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed, nay. Minutes are approved. Next on our agenda would be public input. This is a time when the public may address this city board on any item that is not on the agenda for tonight. If you'd like to address the board, we ask that you come forward, state your name and address, and we try to, as close as you can, hold your minutes to 3 minutes. I've got a couple timers here, so I'm going to start one, and if you go over that, when I put another timer up, please start wrapping up if you could, okay? All right. So does anybody want to come forward for public input? No, excuse me. First of all, state your name and address, please. I need you back behind the mic so people can hear you. That's the problem. I'm sorry, sir.
So my name is Blake Jones, and I live at 2007 North Carl Street in Siloam.
Okay.
I have an issue to address of the noise ordinance that we have here in the city.
Okay, if you would like to read it?
I do.
Read your statement?
Yes, sir.
Certainly. Go ahead.
Good evening. My name is Blake Jones, and I'm here to speak with you about the general noise ordinance this city has implemented. An arrest warrant was issued upon my person in violation of this ordinance for me playing my stereo system in daytime hours around 10 a.m. I was awoken by the Siloam Springs Police Department notifying me there had been a violation and complaint by a citizen of my music. Through recent FOIA requests, I have learned I am the only person to be subjected to an arrest warrant concerning amplified music from a vehicle and the available 13 years of records. Furthermore, in a recent complaint I made to the city about sirens being played my residence at 9:30 a.m., the police department stated this was a city function and condoned this behavior. The Supreme Court has ruled that an ordinance has to be content neutral, and I am very confused how one sound level is allowed and the other is not. I do not know what decibel rating or sound level to abide by. Without a specific tailored ordinance that is not overly broad and vague, it has been found to be unconstitutional and a violation of my freedom of expression. This city has taken funds from me illegally, and I am wondering why the city administrator, Philip, is condoning these actions, and finally what this board intends to do about it. For you to do nothing is not acceptable, as myself and other citizens of this community remain silenced unjustly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. And if you've never come before the board with public input, generally it's not our practice to respond at public input and get into a debate or anything like this, but notes are being taken by people all across this board, and so I'm sure there will be someone contacting you, sir, concerning your issue. Okay. Anyone else? Being none, we will move on to our regularly scheduled items. First is under contracts and approvals. For approval would be the 21-22 board goals. That's not a number. 2021 and 2022 board goals. Philip?
Thank you, Mayor and Board. So back in May, you held a workshop to review a list of potential goals. That list originally contained 58 possible goals, and you pared that down to basically 12 goals with 22 different objectives. Those goals included issues related to growth and annexation, economic development, quality of life, environment, housing, streets, finance, planning and zoning, parks, and communication. The staff has taken those 12 goals and those different objectives, and we've tried to craft a goal statement, an objective statement, how that objective is going to be analyzed, a timeline, and tried to define a measurement on how it's measured whether or not the goal was met. And that's what you have before you for your 2021 and 2022 goals. And staff is available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Any comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and/or questions of staff.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Marla.
I had a couple of things I wanted to talk about. Underneath the economic development analysis by the city's retail consultant, I didn't know we had a retail consultant, so I had a question about that. And then on the next page, underneath the water quality of Sager Creek, that staff would recommend membership of study committee to board. Is this going to be a paid committee, or is it going to be one that's volunteer? It doesn't say that we'll be hiring someone to do that. Did you see where I asked that? Okay.
So I'll answer that one first. It would be a
Okay.
committee of residents who would likely be, as I talked about, it wouldn't be a paid committee. I think it says upon completion of the study, staff will convene, subject to board approval, a committee of property owners adjacent to the downtown creek, residents to review all existing studies and make a recommendation. So it would just be a advisory committee made up of residents that you would approve the list and who's on that committee to study those various studies and make some sort of recommendation of how to proceed to meet that objective, and which is improving and developing Sager Creek and its park environs based on its historical content and economic potential, flooding, and safety issues.
Well, maybe instead of using the word study committee to board, that we could take the word study out there and maybe put evaluation committee or citizen committee, something that would, on the timeline measurement where it says staff will recommend membership of study committee, take that study out there, because they're not doing a study. They're going to look at at the studies.
If that's the board's wishes in a motion, we will be happy to remove that word, yes. And then as it relates to the retail consultant, we have a gentleman that we hired a few years ago by the name of Ricky Hayes, who is out of Owasso, Oklahoma, that works specifically with retailers. And Ricky is a gentleman that we have worked with and we are currently working with to possibly try to get new retailers in the city. You remember when Cotton Patch came to the city, even though they're no longer here, that was a move that was really generated by Mr. Hayes. Cotton Patch was moving out of Kansas into Oklahoma, and he met with them on another client that he was working with, but he also recommended that they look at Siloam Springs, and we were the first and only city there for a while to have Cotton Patch in Arkansas. It's a little easier to do retail development in Oklahoma because the state doesn't tie the hands of cities the way Arkansas does. But Ricky has been very valuable in our economic development efforts as trying to put our name out there to developers and retailers and get us on their map. We haven't been successful yet at landing who we want to land, but it's I will tell you, it's not a one-year process. It is a long process of building relationships and ultimately trying to land that big fish.
So we pay him.
The paid consultant, yes.
What division does that come out of?
Comes out of administration. There's a line item in the budget just for that.
And then on the very last page, the parking lot goals. I wonder, when I was reading, I was wondering, who came up with those, because I didn't hear any of us talk about those at that night.
Yes.
And I don't think that they ought to be attached to the board goals that we wanted to see. If they're goals that we're going to look at eventually, fine, but they're not what the board has brought to you.
They were mentioned at the workshop. You didn't historically at the workshop. You have nominated goals. You have, for those of you who have been through this process before, you'll remember that when you pared the original list down, you might still have 50 goals, and you were given stars or something, and you went to the board and highlighted your top 10, and then we took the top 10 that had the most votes and we created the list of goals, and some of those that were still important but maybe didn't make the list, that maybe had 3 votes, ended up on a parking lot. Now, if you wish this, you didn't do that. I know. You guys didn't do that. That's what I'm saying. You guys didn't do that because when you pared down the list, we ended up with 12 or 22,
Right.
depending on the objectives. These are goals, and you're welcome to take them off. If you take them off, I will assign them to staff anyway, and we'll do them internally because I believe they're important to do. If, from your perspective, I added them, and as you noticed on the list of parking lot goals, it's they're addressed as time allows. So our focus will be, if they remain, to work on the formal goals, and as we have time, we'll try to work on some of these parking lot goals, but they're not high priority as the true goals, if that makes sense.
Well, I only had trouble with one of them, and that was the selling of the Oklahoma property. And I continued to say that we need to hang on to it. The other ones were perfectly fine, but that one I have lots of trouble with.
And again, as a board, you're welcome to remove that completely. And again, we as staff have no authority on whether we sell that or not. It would always come back to the board.
Right.
Mr. Mayor,
Penny?
in response to Director Sappington, I do remember this discussion, and I submitted actually some of those goals, and I'm not one that has a really great memory sometimes, but I do recognize some of those as some of the goals that I actually submitted. And I thought I did remember us talking about the parking lot. So
I don't remember the parking lot.
Okay.
Yes, Carol.
I don't want to interrupt, but I do remember talking about the parking lot goals. And the reason why I remember, because I remember your discussion when we were talking about the Oklahoma property, because it was one that I presented. In fact, there are numerous ones on here that I presented, and we talked about them. So I do know that they were here and they were put on, specifically we talked about putting them on the parking lot. And as long as, are you finished? If she's finished, I'm ready to say something, but if she's not, I'll let her
You had
finish.
more?
I'm asking them. I'm done.
Okay. Carol?
I just wanted to thank staff. I think that they did a very good job of taking the 6 board members' goals and putting them together in a very cohesive manner and giving us the analysis and a timeline and who they're assigned to. I think it helps me look at it and keep track of it, and then when they bring it back on a quarterly basis, we can see where we've been. So I appreciate everything that's been done for this.
Mayor,
Yes. Brad?
take mine off talk. I just like to thank my fellow board members. The process, I think we all can agree, those that have sat through it before, it went well, and we had good, healthy discussion. And so surprisingly, we didn't get to use our stars, and that reflects well on this board. And so I really appreciate the process. I like the layout. It's straightforward. It gives everybody, every citizen out there, time to get critical and give really awesome feedback through social media and other websites, so that'll be entertaining. But I'm with Marla on one. I appreciate you looking at that property, and I know you won't do anything with it other than bring us back potential options out there. And the bottom line is, they will be numeric. I believe there is some numerical value as that site continues to develop, and I'm just really excited to watch Siloam grow, and hopefully we can move some of these objectives, a little bit forward. I know we're all striving for streets, and there's some things that we really want collectively as a board in our wards or those that represent at large. So I'm excited to see us work on a new set of goals as we continue to finish the goals that we have set. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Reed?
on the parking lot goals, I'd like to put a little more relevance to number 3. The utility board, I'd like to see if we could maybe move that up a little bit in priority. I think that's something that the community has asked for, and something that we can do to better serve.
Mr. Mayor, I would second that. Not that it's a motion, but especially in light of our recent discussion with the solar panel customers when we talked about maybe that being part of the discussion that a utility board would have. I think if it's possible to move that up somewhere, that might be helpful.
Yep.
If that's the board's wishes, then I would suggest that your motion include to move that off the parking lot and make that a goal. And you can either defer this back to staff with that suggestion and not approve it tonight, which is fine, or I can take that and understanding it's a pretty straightforward investigate advantages and disadvantages of a utility board, and I can craft the goal and the objective statement if you are willing to let me do that, and then just make this the formal list of goals, or again, just tell us to bring it back at a later date.
Mayor?
Yes. Lisa?
Or I think
Oh,
Reed
I'm sorry.
almost-
Reed, you're still up. It was your question. Okay.
Mr. Patterson, I'd like you to go ahead and do as you stated and be able to bring that to us where we can possibly list that, take it out of the parking lot and move it into the board goals.
Without objection?
I would like to
We're
see
doing
that
it.
be moved up, but I would also like to remove number one from the parking lot as well because of the current and future land value.
But what Philip,
Carol.
or
Go ahead.
what Mr. Patterson is saying is when we make a motion to include that
To
as
make,
part of the
to
motion.
make, yeah, but
Is that what you're
we're
doing?
getting hodgepodge, we're gonna have one motion and that person's gonna have to look around saying, okay, anybody else want to add anything on this? That's the reason I'm saying, obviously, we're not gonna pass this tonight if we're wanting this brought back. So, I'm just making a recommendation when we make this motion that we,
What I'm hearing is a motion to refer this back to staff.
exactly, yeah.
Being parking lot item number 1 and moving parking lot item number 3 from the parking lot list to the actual goals list. And then bring that back to you for hopefully adoption at that time.
So far, that's where we are. We're not through.
Well said.
So, that's where I was headed, was to, because it was obvious we were not going to come up with a motion that we could pass tonight without further
Perfectly fine. I mean,
discussion.
this is the, you've seen this since Thursday. It's, you didn't go through this in May. You didn't, I've spent a lot of time working on it, but that's what we do. So I want this to be your goals. I mean, they're your things that we want to work on. So
Having been on the board whenever we didn't have goals, and there's a few of us in this room that have been in that position. The nice thing that Philip brought this to this board 4 years ago, 4 years ago, maybe 6 years ago. That's 4 years ago, I guess it was. And I guess it's been 6 years now. Yeah, this
will be the sixth
This will be the
year.
sixth year, sixth group of years we're going into. It gives the board ownership of things. So many times it's real easy as a board member to sit back and just wait for staff to bring stuff to you to approve or not approve or whatever like this. And people ask us questions. This is a good way, easy way to get it done and get it discussed so that we can get it on there. And I really appreciate Philip for doing that. And it also gives me, I know when I would go speak to civic groups or whatever like that, I would take a list of my goals and the updates that Philip would give them and update them. And people were they just loved it, that have that brought to their attention. And some of them didn't even realize we had the goals or we were planning on doing that. And a lot of times it answered a lot of questions before they were even asked what we were doing, because obviously your goals that you brought there were not only those that you had come up with, but some of your citizens had also come up with ideas or questions about this, and you felt it was important enough to take it to the goals. So I appreciate it, Director Patterson, for doing that when he came on board.
Mr. Mayor,
Bob?
are we trying to put the parking lot number 3 on the goals and remove parking lot number 1 item altogether? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think so, yeah.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
I can walk and chew gum at the same time. I make a motion that we approve the 21-22 goals as written, to include parking lot item number 3 in the goals and to eliminate parking lot 1 from the parking lot.
Okay.
All right, makes sense. I was
That's what I
concerned.
was afraid
I was concerned we were going to end up having 4 or 5 of these and not.
Well, we worked too long on this.
You guys worked hard on this. Let's get her done.
Let's get her done.
We have the motion before you with the second is to remove item number 1 of the parking list and to
Include number 3.
include number
goals.
3, take it off the parking lot, and put it onto the front goals. Does that make sense?
That's
All
right, and approve the list
And
as
approve
changed.
it,
Yes.
and approve it tonight. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So we have 3 left on the parking lot goals, is that correct?
No, we'd have one,
3 is
two,
going to the
three,
goals.
See
four.
these.
You'd have
I gotta move my iPad up and see the rest of
7.
them.
We're dealing with 2, so you'd still have 5 on the goal. No, you'd taken 1 away, so you'd still have
5.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. Okay. You good with that, Philip?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is there further discussion?
I just want to clarify, I remember talking about him, I just did not hear the terminology parking lot. So.
Okay.
And I just remember it because it's a fun term, so I just remember it for that
Parking
reason.
lot.
And
All had masks on that night, so nobody could.
yeah.
They're all mumbled.
And before I forget it, somebody remind me, did I ask for public comment on this?
No.
They're probably afraid to at this point.
Did I ask for, Kevin, did you think I asked for, okay, and there wasn't any, okay, so, someday I should start writing down no comment or something like that, so keep myself straight on that, okay, I just want to make sure that I gave people opportunity.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's going to be funny to see how many of our directors go out and look under cars in the parking lot and find out where all these other ones are.
Yeah. Okay. All right, so if there's no further discussion, then we will vote on the motion as presented with the amendments to change. We're not doing it in the form of amendment. We're just adding them. Is that correct? That worked that way for you, Jay?
I think the motion was pretty clear.
Move-
Eliminate number 1 and move 3 to the goal.
Move 3 on. Okay. So, without further ado, all those we'll do a roll call and vote on the motion to approve.
Yes.
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 Motion is approved. Let me get my note here down. All right. Thank you. Next is grant application for RDOT State Aid Street Program, Holly Street and West University Street Mill and Overlay. Justin?
Thank you, Justin Bland, City Engineer. So what we have here is an application through RDOT for the State Aid Grant Program, and this is a 100% grant up to a cap of $300,000. Get this. And this is actually the same program that we used to mill and overlay Mount Olive Street 3 or 4 years back from Kenwood up to Tahlequah Street here. And the way it works is they have like a rolling list of projects and they just kind of work through it. So I've been told we're kind of expected to get a project every 4 or 5 years, just depending on funding levels and what everybody else puts in. So they really emphasize trying to max out the $300,000 when you do get a project. So that's kind of why the limits of this is a little bit vague, but the idea is that we're going to max it out with what we can get when they come on and come to town and look at it. But the idea would be to go from the corner of Highway 412 and Holly Street, there where our best is, all the way north to the intersection with the university, and that would be the definite part of it. And then from there, we would just turn the corner going east and just kind of get as far as we can with the remaining funding. And I think we can definitely get past Dogwood Street and then just see where it kind of lands from there. If we end up going over the 300,000, or if we decide we want to try to do that, we'd have to come back to the board for an amendment to the budget to accomplish that. And of course, once they bid this out, we'll have to come back to the board for your approval to move ahead with it. But with that, staff is recommending approval and is available for any questions.
Thank you, Justin. Any comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and or questions of staff.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I'm very excited because part of this is in my ward, and it's the road that leads to JBU, and I know there's been a lot of concern about that road and the condition of it. So thank you. Thank you for thinking of this and looking into it. I would just say, right at the intersection there at Dogwood and University, especially as you turn north onto Dogwood, it's pretty rolly. If there's anything we can do there, and I know that's a section that lots of school buses go by every day. I get to see almost every kid in the school district drive by my house every day. But it's pretty bumpy there, and so I don't know if there's anything within this project you can do to help that. But I'm just putting it out there. Thank you.
It's hard to walk across. I've
is.
walked if you're not paying attention. If you don't have your head down looking at it, you'll catch
it's
your
pretty
foot and
rolly.
trip almost. Yeah. Any other comments? If none, then I'll entertain a motion to approve on the grant as stated.
Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
I move we approve application for RDOT State Aid Program grant for the milling and overlay of Holly Street and West University Street.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to approve? Being none, we'll vote on the motion to approve. Roll call? Yes.
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 Get Rissler there? She didn't have her mic on, so, okay. Motion is approved. Thank you. Next is contract approval with the Police Department with Enterprise Fleet Management, equitable lease agreement for $130,360.22. Chief Gilbert?
Board, Alan Gilbert, Police Chief, Siloam Springs. Right now, we currently have 22 vehicles that are marked patrol vehicles. Patrol vehicles, we have at least eight vehicles at this time that need to be immediately replaced due to mileage, condition, and mechanical issues. Currently, most of the patrol fleet, as you know, runs 24 hours, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Even when they're at the police department, they're running, downloading cameras, different things like that. Captain Miller has been tasked to spearhead the lease program and has done just an excellent job at that. So if approved, this lease program, that will take the cars from being run 24 hours a day to our goal is 12. So that'll give the cars at least a 12-hour break, which they'll last longer. Again, Captain Miller will give you a short brief. The lease program will be happy to answer your questions afterwards. Okay.
Are we going to get the current screen cleared for Captain Miller or whatever? Is he going to take care of it himself? Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the board, Scott Miller, Captain of Siloam Springs Police Department. As Chief Gilbert alluded to, I've been tasked with maintaining our fleet for the police department, and part of that tasking comes up with the projecting of replacement of vehicles and the preventative maintenance and safety of our fleet. Currently, 14 or 40% of our fleet is in range of ages of 7 years to 18 years in age, and mileage of 102,165 to 117,083 miles, which is beyond their useful lives for safe patrol work. The staff has identified 9 total vehicles throughout the department's entire fleet, 8 of the vehicles being in the patrol fleet. And based on mileage, current mechanical condition, and age, we are recommending that we get rid of those vehicles or replace those vehicles. In doing so, I've done a lot of research. How we arrived here is because of the COVID pandemic. We had to seek out alternative sources for vehicles because a lot of the manufacturers had to cease production of vehicles, mainly police rated vehicles, which put delivery of said vehicles back almost a year. So with that, I have contacted Enterprise Fleet Management. Enterprise Fleet Management is a well-known and established company. Staff is recommending that the city conduct a pilot project to determine the viability of the equitable leasing program to better serve the police department and its long-term vehicle needs. The project will involve the leasing of 9 vehicles total, 1 civilian Chevy Tahoe and 8 Ford Police Interceptor utility vehicles, or the Explorers. This is an open-ended lease that provides no early termination mileage or abnormal wear and tear penalties to the city. The lease agreement primary terms is a 36-month lease agreement per vehicle. It includes the preventative maintenance and major mechanical repairs at no cost to the city. Transmissions, major engine failures, things like that. Those costs will be covered under the lease agreement with Enterprise, and they cover that cost through a contract that they have with local dealerships, which saves us money each year. Again, no early termination fees, mileage restrictions, or abnormal wear and tear penalties. This includes the installation of safety equipment like the partitions, cages, and emergency lighting that the vehicles require. You'll notice that there is a 33,333 recommended mileage limits. This is a recommendation from Enterprise Fleet Management based on the equity or the resale value of the vehicle. Meaning if we can keep vehicles under that mileage limit, we will, at the end of the lease, will have the most amount of equity in that vehicle, should we stay under those recommended mileage limits. Based on the quotes that we received from Enterprise Fleet Management, and the annual cost of the 9 vehicles for the 3-year term limit would be $130,360.22. This cost will most likely be reduced based on the viability of transferring current in-car camera systems, our WatchGuard camera systems, from the outgoing vehicles into the new vehicles, as well as some other equipment, and the trade-in value of the outgoing 9 vehicles to the city. We think we can get that cost back down to about $102,460.32. With that, I turn it over to you guys for approval.
Thank you, Captain Miller. All right. Any comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and/or questions of staff. Yes.
Chief, are any of these take-home vehicles? Do we have take-home vehicles, and how does that affect the lease?
Your administration has take-home vehicles, your detectives. These cars are going to be designated for patrol.
Okay.
Where we get longer life out of them. Like I said earlier.
Chief, I don't think you're coming through the mic.
I'm sorry. Some of these cars where they run 24/7, we're 4 people. Like if us 4 partnered a car, that car runs 24 hours a day. We're hoping 2 people will partner that car. In the long term, we're hoping to replace our fleet in about 4 years. That's depending on the cost. Right now, the high side is 130, the low side is 102. We're hoping to be somewhere 102 to 110. That will enable, we'll still have money in our budget to still buy a car or 2 every year to build our fleet up and hopefully replace those fleet cars in the patrol division.
And is there any other cities doing this type of deal?
Yes, sir. I'll let Captain Miller answer that. He's done some research.
Yeah, there are 8 other cities. There are 8 other cities in the state of Arkansas as well as throughout the nation. In Arkansas, currently, the 8 cities that are participating in this very similar lease program is Little Rock, North Little Rock, Maumelle, Bryant, Benton, Rogers, Springdale, and Benton County.
Have you spoke to any of them?
Yes.
And how did they feel?
So far, they're very pleased with the performance and cooperation with Enterprise, as well as their ability to get better and more reliable vehicles for the officers and staff. And because of the equitable lease, it helps long-term budgeting and projection with overturning your fleet and replacing those vehicles in a timely manner.
Thank you.
Yes, Carol.
I'm kind of excited about this because I think this is something that has been thought about before. I like savings, and it says here that we're going to an average savings of $35,000 plus a year. I think that's great, and that we would be able to replace the entire fleet within 4 years. I think that's a good goal. I think that's an extremely good goal. My one question is about the mileage. Do you think that we will be able to attain the 33,333 per year? Is
Yes.
that an attainable goal to keep?
Yes,
around
ma'am.
that?
Very attainable. Captain Miller does a really good job of keeping up with the mileage of vehicles. That's part of our fleet management program.
Okay.
We're currently running about 22,000 to 24,000 yearly with 4 people driving a car. And with these cars driving half the time, we're hoping that these cars will last us longer, and that'll build up our fleet. We currently have several 2019s and 18 models. We've been getting 4 cars a year for the past couple of years. Their mileage is still pretty low, somewhere in the 20s and 30,000s. If we get these cars in, we'll keep the mileage low on those vehicles also.
Because the lower the mileage, the more equity you have when you want to go back and lease more. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
Are these cars comparable to the vehicles that we are using now?
I think they're actually better.
Okay.
One of the things I like the Ford Explorer. It gives the officers a more of tactical advantage of being higher up. It seems like around the country and where I've worked before, the Chargers are just like putting officers in a cockpit. The maintenance is very, very high on the Chargers. So it's my goal to get completely away from the Chargers. The Ford Explorers hold up very well. The gas mileage is excellent. More room. They're better for the officers' health and well-being, just because some of our officers just getting in that low, a lot of us get in that low car. It's really hard sometimes, and our equipment's banging on the inner console. So this actually, we think, will be physically better for the officer.
Because these probably, I know they've got a warranty, but if perhaps there is some maintenance that needs to be done other than oil change, tires, something definitely goes wrong, where do you take the vehicle to be repaired?
I know this, but Scott will give you the exact answer.
Enterprise Fleet Management System will work out a contract, most likely with Superior, because it's our closest dealership, in which we will just schedule it with them and rotate it through there to get that repair done.
That's what I wondered, if it would be local.
Yes,
That's
ma'am.
what I wanted. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Minnie.
I have some just questions for clarification. I like the idea of this. It seems like it could benefit us, but the 33,000 miles, is that over the 3 years or over per year?
That's
We're
per-
allowed up to 33,000 a year.
A year.
Okay. And I was averaging, even for this 7-year-old vehicle, if it had the most in the range of mileage at 117, that would just be about 16,000 per year that we're averaging. But you think it's a little bit more than that on mileage on the cars?
A lot of these older vehicles were take-home units previous.
Okay.
So you had one officer assigned to it, and a lot of these particular vehicles, because I was trying to save them to maintain a certain operational level, I assigned them to, say, school resource officers that were only driving 10 miles a day, and that's why they're not nearly what they would be if they were still being operated by the patrol officers.
But still, the patrol officers were thinking 2022, so we shouldn't have any problem staying below
Correct.
3. Okay, and then the other question is the 102 to 130,000 a year for this lease. Is that per year?
That's per year, ma'am.
Okay, and so our goal is to have all the fleet replaced within 4 years. So I'm assuming about 9 new cars a year because we've got 36. So 36 divided by 4. I'm not great at math. But
Well, yeah.
yes
so
and no.
Of the 36 vehicles, so the police department maintains 36 overall vehicles.
Okay.
So 4 of those vehicles are GM Humvee vehicles, which were acquired through the LESO program that are technically still belonging to the U.S. government.
Okay.
So that leaves us 32 vehicles, 4 of which are CID vehicles, which are unmarked civilian model vehicles, and those were recently replaced in 2018. And of the remaining 28 vehicles, 5 of those are administration vehicles, which we just also replaced in 2018 and 2019, leaving us with the 23 remaining vehicles, one of which is a training vehicle, which was a 2011 Ford Taurus that was purchased used in 2015. And because of the mileage and everything on it, we transitioned it to a training vehicle, and it just gets used to transport people back and from to training because it's good on gas mileage, to be honest with you. And it's just an unmarked vehicle. So the 22 vehicles that are remaining in the patrol division, of those vehicles, 8 or 2017 or newer. And so the replacing 9 are those 9 vehicles, which basically leaves us 5. Those 5 vehicles are 2016, 2017 vehicles. So by us doing this lease and replacing the big chunk of 9 cars, I am able to purchase 2 cars a year to get the remaining cars replaced, replacing the entire fleet in 4 years, with the anticipation that we're going to lose at least 1 car based on accident or some kind of mechanical failure.
That is very helpful, because my concern was if we're planning on 9 new leases every year, by years 3, 4, and 5, we're paying triple this. So, but that's not it at all. Okay, wonderful. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Marla?
I just want to bring some more thought to this. If we were buying them and bought 4 every year for the next 3 years, that's 12 cars we would own for $570,000 approximately. We own them. So if we lease these, we've spent $390,000, and then we don't own them.
So, if I may, ma'am, so to purchase these particular vehicles on our own, we are subject to paying the MSRP of the vehicle, because the only 2 police rated packaged vehicles that are on state bid are currently the Charger or the Dodge Durango. Our experience with the Dodge Chargers, as Chief alluded to a minute ago, they are very quick, very fast, and we have very young, inexperienced officers that tend to get themselves in a little bit of trouble, and we've had a lot of accidents because of the performance of those particular cars, as well as some health and safety concerns, because not all of our guys are the same size and stature, and so getting in and out of these cars is quite cumbersome for some of our officers. So back to your point, if I was to purchase, and I'll just use the Ford Interceptor utility at MSRP, it's $48,995. That's what the MSRP of that vehicle is. Plus, and I'll be modest, at a $13,000 upfit. The quote before you is up to as a $15,000 upfit. I don't think it's going to use that much, but we projected that high just in case the cost has been increased since I first got the quote. Because of COVID, everything's kind of fluctuating and going up. So if you add the $13,000, we would pay $61,995 per vehicle, which would be a total, if we purchased them, of $543,643. Doing the lease program, the estimated cost of the lease for 3 years is $391,080 for the total lease. And we have the option to purchase those 9 vehicles at the end of the lease. And that, if we add that remaining cost in there, there would be a total of $464,371. So overall, we are going to save the city $79,177 for all 9 cars. When I projected the $35,000 savings, that's on the preventative maintenance costs of those vehicles, as well as projected wear and tear that we're currently paying on 9 vehicles, if that helps.
Well, my concern is at the end of the lease period, who's going to place the value, the retail value? Are you going to go by Blue Book? It's going to be NADA?
They are currently using Kelly Blue Book or the NSDA Black Book trade-in value, just like all the other dealerships use. The difference between Enterprise is they take those vehicles back and they resell them themselves at their dealerships. So typically, on average, they get about 15% more per vehicle because they're selling them themselves, and because they project the cost based on mileage and year and type of vehicle, they can give us a pretty close estimate of what equity value we would have in that vehicle, what would come back to us. Or, like I said, at the end of that lease, we can purchase those vehicles, which would be roughly about $79,000 to purchase all 9 at the end of that 3 years, should we choose to do that.
Do they go down that much in value from, a 50,000 down to 7,000?
Yes, ma'am. And you got to remember, a big portion of that cost is the upfit, the cages, the lights, the sirens, radios, the watch guard, in-card cameras.
Yeah, but that's not in the 40,000. I mean, that was, you
So,
said
yep,
60.
40,000. It's just like if you purchased the vehicle, your vehicle from a dealership, and you drive it off the lot, it's going to depreciate.
Absolutely, I know that stuff. My concern is at the end of 3 years, we have nothing.
No, ma'am. We could either purchase the
But we don't have any, we've used it, but we don't have anything where we've invested that in. And I think purchase,
So if we choose to release another 9 vehicles, whatever equity we have in those vehicles, which would be basically what we would pay for those vehicles, will transfer to the cost, offsetting the cost of the new 9 vehicles, so it will be cheaper.
so it was $7,000, I think is what they had allowed for one, and maybe 10 for the other, or 7 for 8 of them, and 11 for the Tahoe. So
Yes, ma'am. 7,704.03 and 11,659.29.
$67,000, that wouldn't even buy one car.
It goes
But we're gonna buy all 9 of them for $67,000?
because it's an equitable lease, so it's not, our money is not going to nothing. We are paying down the cost of the car. We are not just leasing the car and returning it. We are paying down the cost of the car, almost like a vehicle
Our equity's
loan.
gonna be about $70,000 at the end of the lease.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Mayor?
Yes, Brad.
When the chief said Scott did an excellent job, that's all I need to know. I think in this day and age, for us to even question PD on what they prefer to drive, they have a chain of command, a change of a mentality. He gave Chief Gilbert read a statement. We applauded it. The newspaper ran it. We attached it to our minutes. They are transitioning from a other mindset, and the mindset they're going in is the right direction for that department. I am not a police officer. I'm ready to make a motion, and let's get on to more important subjects, please. No further comment?
I'm going to ask for the motion because there's always possible discussion after you've made your motion.
Right.
So,
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
I make a motion to approve equitable lease agreement with Enterprise Fleet Management for the acquisition of 9 police vehicles in the amount of $130,360.22.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to approve? Yes, Carol.
I just want to say I appreciate your presentation. I thought it was very helpful, very straightforward. Thank you.
Anyone else? Being none, we will vote on the motion to approve. Roll call.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next is construction contract for the airport taxiway lighting rehabilitation for bid acceptance and grant application approval. Don Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Board, Don Clark, Community Development Director. Before you tonight for your consideration is a construction contract, bid acceptance, and grant application approval for the taxiway lighting rehab project at the airport. In January of this year, the city approved a contract with Garver Engineering to bid the package for the bid package development for the lighting rehab project. This project will consist of changing out the taxiway or the edge lighting, going from what we currently have today and upgrading it to an LED model. Excuse me. Also, on the north side of our current runway, some of these lights do not sit in a can, so they will be concreted in and sitting in a more structured can that also would help with longevity. On June 17th, bids were open for this contract, for this project. Broadway Electric Incorporated of Forest City, Arkansas submitted the long bid for $308,060. The engineer estimate was for over $325,000. The project will be completed with a combination of FAA Airport Improvement Program funds as well as the FAA CARES Act funds. If you recall, earlier this year we received funding from the FAA as part of the CARES Act that also gave us $30,000, but also took care of any previously approved improvement that would have required the city to put in a piece, whether it be a 10% or a 20% match. So with that being said, there is no monetary requirement for the city for this project. It will completely be covered by the grant funding. Staff recommends the approval to utilize the FAA Airport Improvement Program funds along with the FAA CARES Act funds to complete the rehabilitation project for the taxiway lighting, specifically to include the following. Accept the low bid by Broadway Electric for work associated with the taxiway rehab project. Allow the city and airport staff to submit a grant to the FAA in the amount of $377,160 for the taxiway lighting rehabilitation project. 90% of that will come from the AIP funds, with the remaining 10% coming from the CARES Act. Upon receipt of the grant offer from the FAA and following city attorney review and approval, allow the city and airport staff to execute the FAA grant offer. Upon execution of the grant offer, allow the city to execute and construct a construction contract with Broadway Electric in the amount of $308,060 for the associated taxiway rehab project. Upon execution of the grant offer, allow the city staff to execute a construction phase services project contract with Garver Engineering LLC in the amount of $31,600 for the associated taxiway for the administration of the project. Staff recommends approval. We stand ready for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. Any public comment? All right. If none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and or questions of staff.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'm ready to make a motion.
That's fine. I was just, it was going slow. I was getting ready to ask for that.
Thank you very much, Dawn. Appreciate that. I move that we approve submittal of FAA grant application to complete the taxiway lighting rehabilitation project at Siloam Springs Municipal Airport, utilization of FAA Airport Improvement Program and FAA CARES Act grant funds, and the bid from Broadway Electric.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to approve? Being none, we will vote. Excuse me, Renee. Who seconded it? Lisa? She couldn't hear you. Yeah, you forgot to hit the button? Okay. Never mind. All right. We have a motion and a second. No further discussion. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you, Don. All right, now we're going to move into more ordinances, and we're going to start with Mr. Ben Rhodes. We are on page, the last item on the first page of tonight's agenda. Ben.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. I'm Ben Rhodes, Senior Planner. Before you is the third reading for the rezoning ordinance that's occurring at the 42 and 4300 block of Highway 412 East, going from A1 to C2. Staff has not received any additional comments since the second reading, and we continue to recommend approval, and we stand by for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any comments from the audience? Being none, we will vote. Or excuse me, how about we turn it over to the board for comments and or questions of staff?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, Marla.
Is this second or third reading?
This is third reading.
Okay.
Oh, I didn't read it. I didn't read the whole ordinance like I normally do I? Sorry about that. I'm trying to speed things up a little bit. Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Carol.
I'm just going to move that we place ordinance number 20-13 on its third reading, suspending the rules and reading by title only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is further discussion on the motion to approve? Being none, we will vote on the motion to approve. Roll call?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 20-13, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, City Zoning Map, rezoning from A1 to C2 the property located in the 4300 block of U.S. Highway 412 East.
Thank you, Philip. I'll now entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 20-13.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to adopt? Being none, we'll vote. Roll call?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Ordinance 20-13 is adopted. Thank you. Next is ordinance 20-15. I'll entertain a motion to place ordinance 20-15 on its second or third reading. It's the board's pleasure on vacation of unnamed right-of-way at 2100 block of Highway 412 East. Ben?
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Board. This is the second reading for the proposed right-of-way closure that's behind 2B's Auto Sales. Staff has not received any additional comments on this since the first reading, and we continue to recommend approval and stand by for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Any comments from the audience? Being none, we'll move it to the board for comments and or questions of staff.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Reed.
since we have not received any comments or complaints, I'd like to do second and third reading.
Okay. You want to make that in the form of a motion?
Yes.
Okay. Motion to place.
I will place ordinance number 20-15 on its second and third reading, suspending the rules and reading by title only.
Okay.
Second.
I had you down, Carol, already. Is there further discussion on the motion? Being none, we'll vote on the motion. Roll call?
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 20-15, an ordinance vacating and abandoning a certain portion of right-of-way within the Killabrews Addition, City of Siloam Springs.
Thank you, Philip. Now I will entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 20-15.
So moved.
Second.
Motion is second. Is there further discussion? Being none, we will vote on the motion to adopt. Roll call?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Ordinance 20-15 is adopted. Thank you. Next is ordinance 20-17. Christina, this is Arkansas Natural Resource Commission Board issue for water treatment plant upgrade. Your packet reads first and only reading. However, we have been advised by attorney that we might need to make this do this differently, but we'll let Christine either explain that or we can do that once you get through presenting. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the board. Christina Patriches, Finance Director. Taylor Marshall of Friday Eldridge and Clark has joined us this evening as bond counsel and will be available to answer bond-related questions at the end of this presentation. In 2018, citizens approved a tax to upgrade the water treatment plant. With the help of our financial advisor, staff determined an issuance of bonds through the Arkansas Natural Resources Commission, also known as ANRC. would be the least expensive way to fund the project. The purchase agreement for a bond issuance through ANRC would include the following terms. The total bond issue will not exceed $31 million and will be repaid over 20 years with interest and service fees totaling 1.75%. The city will continue to set aside each month 3% of net utility revenue for repairs and replacements of the utility system until the bond is repaid. And these funds are what we refer to in the budget as depreciation funds. A debt service reserve equal to 1/2 of the maximum annual debt service will also be maintained. But the most important thing is that this is actually a federal grant through the state revolving fund, and federal guidelines must be adhered to as a condition of the grant. So staff is recommending approval of the purchase agreement and bond issuance through ANRC. There was some confusion about whether the ordinance needed to be read one time or all 3 readings at one time. So we haven't resolved that. So as a result, staff is simply requesting that we put the ordinance on readings, the first, second, and third reading, suspending the rules and reading by title only. And staff is available along with Mr. Marshall for questions.
Any public comment? Mr. Marshall, I know we got a long agenda tonight, but you've come a ways. If you have something you'd like to address this just for...
I think my name's Taylor Marshall. I'm with Friday Eldridge and Clark. And what you have is an ordinance before you that authorizes the issuance of the bond, which is actually required by state law. So if you look at the ordinance, this sets out the terms of the bond, and we can just kind of go through. If you have it in front of you, you can see on page 2, this is the principal repayment schedule. And as she mentioned, it's 20 years, but you'll notice that for about a 3-year period until April 15th, 2022, this is interest only while you draw down on this bond. This is a drawdown bond. And so as money is needed for your project, you will draw this down and you will pay interest during that period, interest only on the amounts that you've drawn. You have what's called a disbursement cutoff date that's April 15th, 2022. At that point, you can no longer draw down on the bond. So the bond will be authorized and issued in the principal amount of $31 million, but you've got to draw all that $31 million down by that April 15th, 2022. At that point in time, you will begin paying principal and interest on the bond semi-annually, each April 15th and October 15th. And the way this will work is when the tax collections come in, and you all have already received tax collections. This tax was approved back in 2018 by the voters. And it's my understanding that the tax collections received to date is what's going to be funding this debt service reserve fund that was mentioned. So that debt service reserve fund is in the amount of 1/2 of the maximum annual principal and interest requirement on the bond, which you'll see on, and this is back in section 8. It's in the amount of $921,872. So at closing, you will take collections of the tax that you've already received. You'll fund up your debt service reserve. Thereafter, as tax collections come into the city, there's established a fund at the city into which those collections will go, and then the city treasurer will begin sending monthly payments to the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, who is actually the state agency that's purchasing this bond. So they're going to be the bond owner. So it's the revolving loan fund. Arkansas Development Finance Authority actually buys the debt, and the debt is administered by the Arkansas Natural Resources Commission. So as the tax comes in, the collections can only be used to pay debt service. And so you will be paying that 1/6 amount of your next principal and interest once the P&I starts to after April 15th, 2022. It's 1/6 of the P&I will be going monthly to ADFA. To the extent that you're collecting more than what's required to service this debt, as I mentioned, the tax can only be used to pay debt service. And so there's a mechanism in the ordinance which allows you to then prepay principal with the excess, and that's going to be at the option of the city. So to the extent that you want to start prepaying the bond immediately, you can do that with excess tax collections. Other than that, I think everything else, as was in the presentation, is accurate. And so, if you have any questions for me, let me know.
So what you're saying is that if our tax come in and they're better than anticipated or projected, we will be able to pay this off early.
That's correct.
Because many times bonds are not set. We've been in bonds where we were not allowed to pay early, but we're going to pay the interest off first before we do anything.
That's correct. You can begin paying principal down as soon as you start receiving excess collections.
Thank you. Sounds good. Sounds good to me. All right. Anyone have any other questions for Mr. Marshall? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate you. Thank you. Christina, through? All right. Any further comments or any comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and or questions of staff. Yes, Carol.
Is this similar to the way we did the wastewater treatment when we
It's
upgraded?
exactly the same.
That's what I thought.
Mhm.
And we paid that off
Early,
early.
yes. Mhm.
Okay.
All right, Brad.
Make a motion.
All right.
Place ordinance number 20-17 on its first, second, and third reading, suspending the rules, reading by title only.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to approve? Being none, we will vote on the motion to approve. Roll call?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 20-17, an ordinance authorizing the issuance of sales and use tax bond for the purposes of financing all or a portion of the cost of construction of extensions, betterments, and improvements to the water facilities of the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas.
Thank you, Philip. I'll now.
The payment of the principal of and interest on the bonds and prescribing other matters related thereto.
Sorry about that. Your voice dropped, and I just wasn't looking at it. I thought you were done. All right. Apologize for that. You're okay. Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. I don't believe there's going to be any further discussion. If they are, yell out right now. Otherwise, let's roll call.
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you. Thank you again, Mr. Marshall. Thank you for coming up here. All right. Next is ordinance, let me make sure I'm right on the line. Okay, 2018, first reading, amending section 102 of the City Municipal Code, rezoning from R2 to PD, the 700 to 1000 block of Highway 16 South. Ben Rhodes.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board. Before you is a rezoning permit located at the 700 to 1000 block of Highway 16. The request is to rezone an R2 property consisting of 29.6 acres to PD, or planned development. What's unique about the PD zone, which stands for the planned development, is the applicant has the ability to customize the zone's bulk and area requirements to the development proposal. They are proposing specific standards that I will cover later on in this presentation. The proposed PD zone allows for multifamily and single-family housing and a large common area and park. On March 3rd this year, the board tabled this rezoning to March 17th. However, the application was withdrawn by the applicant because there was an issue found with the legal description that needed to be corrected with a quiet title decree. This has now been finalized, allowing the applicant to proceed with the rezoning request before you. The applicant proposes two areas that you see shown on the image on the right. Area 1 is intended for single-family housing on slightly smaller lots than what is normally permitted in the R2 zone. Area 2 is shown to be the location of the future multifamily with designated open space park in that area. The park will be maintained by a POA to be established at the time of the development of the property. This map is intended to be conceptual design. The applicant will have to come back with a preliminary plat and significant development permit for the development approval. Here you see the proposed development standards for Area 1. Some notable differences between this and R2 include the decreased minimum lot area from 7,000 to 6,000 square feet. The lot width is reduced by 10 feet from 60 feet down to 50 feet, and the lot coverage is increased by 5% to 45% allowed. Floor to area ratio has increased by 5% to 0.245. And the side landscape buffer is reduced by 5 feet to match the proposed side setback. With Area 2, we transition to the northern side of the project where the multifamily is proposed. Notable code changes include adding a few more use units for low-density family and small institutions, although it's anticipated that this area will develop for solely multifamily dwellings. They've increased the side setbacks to be better in line with a typical R4 lot, and also increased the FAR up to 65%. This is to permit two-story apartment buildings. And the concept for Area 2 is continued. The park design, which is named the Great Lawn, buffers the single-family uses to the south from the multifamily uses in the north. Future residences of both areas will be able to use the park. The park will contain a walking trail as well as a playground in the center, and it will be privately maintained by the POA. Below is a general explanation on the open space and landscaping for the Great Lawn. This is also included with the applicant's proposal, which is included in your memo's attachment. Here you see the two housing densities shown on the future land use map, the high density and medium density family. The high density family allows for up to 30 units per acre. However, the proposed zoning density will be considerably less at 16 units per acre for Area 2 and 6 units per acre for Area 1. The red shading in the northwest corner is buffering for the Highway 412 for the benefit of the commercial businesses. Because none of these businesses own the land, it's not feasible for them to utilize that little sliver area. And here you see the site. This is facing to the north. The neighborhood to the left is Eastgate, and you can see that there is a stub-out street built to tie into the subject property. And this will be completed to tie into Eastgate and run all the way to Highway 16 as part of the development of the single-family portion of the project. You can also see a similar multifamily land uses exist to the north of the area. And I don't have the stylus here, so I'm going to try to draw that in just so you can see. Maybe this is that. Well, it's not working. It's just up on the top area is where I was meant to point out is the multifamily is consistent with the built environment. Staff and the Planning Commission are recommending approval of the proposed PD zone and its standards, and we are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any public comment? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and questions of staff. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
I place ordinance number 20-18 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading by title only.
Second.
Motion and second. Is there further discussion on the motion? Being none, we'll vote on the motion to approve. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number 20-18, an ordinance amending section 102-21 of the Siloam Springs Municipal Code, City Zoning Map, rezoning from R2 to PD, the property located in the 700 to 1000 block of Highway 16 South.
Thank you, Philip. Next is ordinance number 20-19, first reading, annexation of 53.63 acres at the 23,000 block of Lawless Road. Ben Rhodes?
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. Before you is a group petition annexation request to take in 53.63 acres of territory located north of Lawless Road, encompassing the Carly Crossings Addition, Phase 1 of Lawless Ranch Addition, and 2 lots in the Heritage Ranch Addition. The proposal includes 3 different zones. If approved, this will all go into Ward 1. Here you see the site plan provided with the petitioner's application. The area being annexed is located within the bolded black lines. Apart from the 2 developed subdivisions, the larger area here to the left of the subdivision at the top there is presently undeveloped. However, it was approved for the preliminary plat application last month to develop more single-family housing. The applicant has submitted a zoning plan exhibit. The proposed R1 zone is in green and located along the north side of Lawless Road. This matches what's shown on the Carly Crossing preliminary plat. The interior lots are shown to be slightly smaller with the R2 zone. This is shown in the blue color. And finally, the purple color is depicted for the proposed R3 zones, which matches the 2-family housing in Lawless Ranch, which is already constructed in that area. So transitioning to the future land use map, because this request involves zoning of new territory, I'm displaying this map for your consideration. The proposed zones are all residential, and the densities are generally consistent with what's shown on the map. However, staff is suggesting a slightly higher density for the area. Again, my stylish is not working, but to the large box area to the left of the subdivision at the top there. So due to the reason we are requesting that higher density is because the infrastructure and road improvements, which would allow for higher density housing. As you recall, this was covered when we presented the Carly Crossings preliminary plat to you last month. Staff reviewed the proposal and it appears to meet state requirements. For petition annexations, just to brush you up on the rules for that, there must be a majority or 51% of the property owners and a majority of the represented land area consenting to the annexation for it to be considered lawful. In other words, it's a simple majority rules doctrine. In this case, both thresholds have been met. Staff is recommending approval, and we stand by for any of your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and or questions of staff.
Mayor?
Yes, Brad.
Hey, Ben, so on Zone 3, so they developed that, and now we're bringing that into the city. Is that correct?
That's correct. There was actually a condition on the preliminary plat that they annex in.
Okay, and then on the end of the street, did we not put in a some sort of soft surface access for fire? Is that on Zone 3?
There is a soft surface access that ties into the Lawless Ranch subdivision that is completed at this time.
That's still, as we annex it in, that's still acceptable?
My understanding is it is still acceptable as is. It meets our remoteness rule, and that's why we had the extra access, because we didn't want there to be a single access into Lawless Ranch.
Yeah, I don't want to I'm going to beat that dead horse. I let the foxtail go and my concerns on 16 because you've heard it before. But I'm going to say it one more time. Having lived that life, that is a poor idea to continue for emergency services, and I know it meets the code. It is poor. I knew this would all come in one day, and here we are today. I'm happy with annexation as one of the board goals. It concerns me when we do those sort of things. It's not a high standard that I think our emergency services people deserve when they're driving that type of apparatus in an emergency environment. But it is done. I've made my statement, and I thank you, sir.
Thank you, Brad. No other comments? I'll entertain a motion.
Mayor?
Yes, Carol.
I move that we place ordinance number 20-19 on its first reading, suspending the rules and reading by title only.
Motion to. Thank you, Brad. Further discussion? Being none, we'll vote on the motion to approve. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes?
Yes. Yes.
Motion is approved. Philip?
Ordinance number number 20-19, an ordinance accepting the annexation of certain territory to the city of Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and assigning the same to a ward.
All right. Thank you. Now we'll move into resolutions. First resolution is Resolution 3220, Final Plat Development Permit, Revised Gunners Edition, 100 block of North Lincoln Street and 106 North Country Club Road. Ben Rhodes.
Yes, thank you again, Mr. Mayor and Board. For your first resolution, you're considering an acceptance of a final plat that finalizes the Gunter's Revised Edition, an infill project that's located at 100 block of North Country Club Road. The project includes a commercial lot that fronts on North Lincoln Street. As you recall, the plat was tabled at the last meeting due to the applicant needing additional time to finish the project. The project is now complete, save for a few minor punch list items. Here is the site plan. It's nearly identical to the preliminary plat. The only difference is that the one of the lots the lots are renumbered because one of the lots was taken out of the plat because the ownership changed between preliminary plat and final plat. But other than that, it's an identical subdivision. And here you see the project site facing to the north. Obviously, this was taken early on the project when it was still under construction. It's complete now. So staff is recommending approval with the following conditions. First, the applicant must file the plat within 45 days. Second one is the applicant must submit a 2-year maintenance bond. The third is the applicant shall provide a grading plan. And then finally, the applicant shall complete punch list items and submit final testing records. Both conditions 2 and 3 on the bond and the grading plan have been fulfilled by the applicant since the time of writing the memo and are now considered moot. With that, we are available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Any comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and/or questions of staff.
Mayor?
Yes, Brad.
Make a motion to approve Resolution 32-20, authorizing a final plat development permit for the 100 block of North Lincoln Street, 106 North Country Club Road, subject to the recommended conditions of approval.
Second.
Motion is second. Further discussion on the motion? Being none, we will vote on the motion to approve. Roll call.
Yes.
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 Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Next is Resolution 33-20, Significant Development Permit, New Life Ranch Church of Siloam Springs, Inc., 1611 Sherry Whitlock Drive. Ben Rhodes.
Yes, so thank you again, Mr. Mayor and members of the board. Before you is a significant development permit occurring at 1611 Sherry Whitlock Drive. The request is they add a 24,635 square foot new classroom and office facility. Here you see the full site plan. There, the buildings at the bottom left corner there is what's being proposed with parking on the west side, as well as an additional drive on the west side. And then you can also see drainage in the redder color and the purple color there. That's routed along the east to north side of the property through designated drainage ditches. Excuse me. So this is a same site plan, but we're focusing in to the building that's under consideration for construction. The drive circulation is shown as by the arrows there that would allow vehicles to filter into the property and then filter back out through the same drive. There are also ample sidewalks, as you see in the darker color outline around that, that would connect both sides of the structure. And here you see the landscape plan. You see the perimeter trees and ample trees are shown at the rear, particularly in the northwest corner of the site. Existing trees are credited to the applicant through our tree preservation initiative. Here is elevation. This is a side, or this is a schematic of what the building would look like from the south and north elevations. The areas shown on either side are covered porticos used for vehicular pickup and drop-offs. The facility will be constructed of natural materials such as stone and stucco. This image shows you the site plan we were just looking at, overlaid on top of an aerial photo. The applicant has has indicated that there's a possible second phase of this project, which will include adding a new sanctuary assembly space north of the proposed building. When this occurs, traffic will increase on the proposed western driveway, thereby possibly creating a traffic complication with the egressing traffic from Sacred Creek Community Church, which is just located to the south east of this area. So I'd like to highlight that western drive in particular. As you can see, it is aligned closely with the drive that the daycare uses across the street, which is the drive in the lighter pavement shade color there. While this will not be an issue with the daycare center, since they're operating at different times from the church, it is in close proximity of the northern drive for the Sacred Creek Community Church, which is the drive next to that has the darker asphalt color of the arrow coming out there, the red arrow. The central concern is the dual use of the center turn lane. When left-turning motorists attempt to merge with traffic at busy times, they will use the center turn lane as a holding area until the traffic clears for safe merging. With both drives in close proximity being used close to the near or identical times, motorists exiting both drives will attempt to use the same center turn lane, thus creating a potential conflict zone that emerges where I have the yellow circle. Staff is suggesting a condition that traffic egressing the western drive, which is proposed for improvements, be made as a right out or westbound only. If a vehicle wishes to travel east from this drive, It can do so by turning left on Heartland Drive and working from there back east to Sherry Whitlock via Lincoln Street. Here you can see the site. This is looking to the north. The proposed Western Drive is the one there that shows as incomplete. If you can see that, or incomplete drive there on the left. And you can see with there's a current curb cut, but no driveway. The daycare center drive is nearly identical, or nearly right across the street from that. And the one from Shaker Creek is the darker one further down. That's somewhat offset from the existing drive to the facility. So here are the following staff conditions. The first is regarding the exterior parking lot lighting. That we included in a lighting plan. This would need to be shown when the building plan set. The second condition, which is now moot, is related to the sidewalk improvement fee needed for a section of sidewalk on Lincoln Street, just out of frame of this photo, that cannot reasonably be constructed by the applicant due to drainage structures that are in that area. So staff is assessing a fee in lieu. This has been paid by the applicant as of yesterday. The third condition refers to the right-out requirement for the Western Drive. And the fourth and fifth conditions are centered around the drainage improvements required on the site. The Planning Commission's motion recommending approval excluded the third condition related to the right-out only for the Western Drive. Therefore, it is not included in the resolution. Should the board wish to add that back, a motion needs to be made to include the staff recommended conditions. With that, staff is recommending approval with the 5 stated conditions, and we're available for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. I was just getting ready to ask if somebody wanted to come up before I turned it over to the public.
Certainly. Ron Holmeyer, Civil Engineering, 701 South Mount Olive. Couple of points. The first one is the condition number 3 by the staff about the right turn only out of the new drive. Actually, the use of the second existing driveway, as we like to refer to it. It is, in my opinion, grandfathered, and so therefore shouldn't be subject to any changes or revisions since it is grandfathered. Second thing is the only thing that was stated at Planning Commission is they were concerned about the driveway coming from the child care facility, and no mention was made of the Sager Creek Church Drive being an issue at that time. So, either that was an issue that just somehow got overlooked, or when the first issue was found to be mute, they looked for another. I don't know. But we would respectfully request that you leave condition 3 out of your approval for the fact that it is a grandfathered driveway that is existing, and it will be the only way in and out of that parking lot on the west side of the new building for the foreseeable future. Second point would be on the drainage. Golly, where do I start on that? There's a long history. Pastor Tim knows it better than I do, but the staff is asking that we make the drainage improvements on the east side of the property next to Lincoln Street, where there are no plans to make improvements at this time, just because we're making improvements over on the west side of the property with the new building and the parking. Part of the history, I'm going to go ahead and touch on this, is the city at 2 different occasions came in, asked the church for permission, and made drainage improvements across the church property to try and improve and solve a drainage problem in Gabriel Park. The first time they cut a ditch from the outlet of the detention basin at Gabriel Park down to the church's detention basin, and then from there it traveled across church's property to Lincoln Street at the corner of Sherry Whitlock. Second time they came back and decided that wasn't working the way they wanted it to, and asked if the church would allow the city to install a storm pipe along their north property line and then down their east property line to the outlet of the church's detention basin. And the church agreed and allowed the city to do that as well. So the supposed, or my understanding anyway, of the drainage, erosion, and other issues with the neighboring property is in and around the vicinity of that pipe discharge and the detention basin discharge. And so it's hard to see how that is the church's fault for there being drainage issues at that location when the city is the one that made the improvements to that point, not the church. And like I said, we would, for that reason, we'd like to ask that you respectfully leave off the last two conditions as well related to drainage, because they're not intending to do that. And thirdly, I guess I should go ahead and say that the church had a local contractor go out, clean out that ditch, widen it, and open it up. So whatever the previous drainage problems were should not be as bad, if a problem at all, anymore. So those were two key things I wanted to point out. So, and we're here to answer any questions if anybody has any. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron. Pastor Tim, you have any comments you want to make?
Tim Estes, 215 Grand Court. Really, you know, we've done everything we can to cooperate with the city on two accounts. To let them cut a drainage ditch across the back of the property and enter our retention pond. So there's a weir there that controls the flow of our water. It's been there since 1998, and so the flow of our water off of our property has been the same since that time. The pipe that was alluded to goes around the little weir. So when the city put that in, it's not controlled water. And the neighbor that had made complaints, not to us, but to the city, I went over there. I've been investigating it. I don't see the erosion that he's talking about. Nonetheless, we went ahead and widened the ditch, cleaned it out, did our due diligence to make sure that it's in good shape and to be a good neighbor both to him and to the city as well. So we'd appreciate any consideration that you might have in that regard. So any questions for me, I'd be glad to answer. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and their questions of staff.
Mayor?
Yes, Brad.
I tend to side with the planning commission and strike 3, but in support of striking number 3, I'm just curious, and I'm not going to put Tim on the spot, but who's the longest-winded preacher? Is it New Life? Do they get out first, or does Sager get out first? How's that work?
Definitely Sager Creek's the longer-winded preacher, I'm just saying.
I think Sager gets out first.
Wins.
Oh, Lisa, yes.
On the drainage, what initiated the first having to fix it? Does anybody know?
It didn't work.
I mean, was it because of the church, after the church was built, or what? I mean.
Would you ask that again? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it.
So when the city first came to you the first time about fixing some drainage problems, what was the reason they needed to fix it? Was it because of your building?
No, it wasn't. It was because of the subdivision north of our property. Gabriel Park, is that the name of it? And so they have had some tremendous issues up there with flooding, and one gentleman particularly, his garage was flooded numerous times, so he was upset, rightfully so, and so they came to us to try to remedy that, and they asked to cut a swath. I wish we had the picture of it, but from that back in the trees there in that northwest corner, it winds through there to behind the church. So basically we cut a big swale across our property, which we really didn't want to do, but we wanted to help the city, and so we did that. Then it wasn't sufficient enough. He was still having flooding up in that subdivision. They came back and said, we'd like to come across the north edge of the property down the east edge of the property with a pipe underground. Would that be okay? I said, absolutely. But that one went behind the dam or the weir, so we're not controlling that water. So if there are any issues downstream for our neighbor, we feel like it's the city's responsibility, not necessarily ours, because we didn't engineer it, we didn't put it in, we just simply gave permission for that in an attempt to help the flooding to the north. Does that help?
Philip?
If I may, I would
Yeah.
ask you to let Justin, the city engineer, describe that also.
Justin Bland, city engineer. Let me see if I can find a better viewpoint here. It might be easier. Nope. Well, if you can kind of imagine, this is the survey drawing, but it, down on the bottom left of all the lines there is where the building is being proposed, and then on the far north is where Gabriel Park subdivision is, and that is correct. There was a house there. That Gabriel Park subdivision was built in the late 90s, and the detention basin is just severely undersized, so there was definitely an issue there. So the city did go through that. I mean, the church has been a great partner over the years in this matter, trying to assist with that. But the water did still go to the same point here. It's not that the water was necessarily rerouted significantly as it crosses onto the southeast side where the current issue is. But there was a ditch cut and then some pipe put around there. That's kind of as going back to the reason we have this condition in there is really just to kind of see some type of improvement there. I guess this pen drawing isn't working here. I can't do that. But the upper right-hand corner of the house right there is where the issue is. And the reason that we were putting the condition in there is that because since this ditch was cut about 4 years ago by the church, this issue with the resident has become worse. And I suspect that it's because there was previously the waters went diagonally to the southeast across that property, and when 3 or 4 years ago, basically a 90 or 45 degree bend was cut in the ditch. I think that's what's just causing the water to back up a little bit more than it used to. So we're just wanting to get some engineering analysis of that, and then just possibly some improvements, routing it or widening it. I don't think it has to be anything very expensive, just something to kind of say, we got a resident here with an issue, and we're wanting to make sure it's addressed as part of this project.
Okay, that was going to be two of my questions, because I've been working with you and Philip a lot about drainage around the city of Siloam Springs. I was wanting to know what kind of cost are they looking at? And so is this an issue that was created when the subdivision was created and it wasn't done properly, and now we're putting it on them to fix?
Well, so the issue was never on this property. It was always the upstream property. And then, as I said, the church was a great partner with the city. The city came in and tried to help that upstream subdivision by improving the capacity across the church property. The area is really flat there, and a lot of that was before my time. There was some logistical issues. There used to be a house on the corner of Sherry Whitlock and Lincoln, and it was also low. So there was a balance. You couldn't let too much down because you were going to flood that house, and when you're trying to help this house. So there was a lot going on there. Since then, that house has been demolished, so it kind of simplified the equation a little bit. But the issue wasn't caused by the church, and it was always upstream of the church. We were trying to get the water across the church property faster to help with that upstream.
And we want the church to pay for it.
Well, so that was an existing ditch until, again, I wish I could just draw on this, but this project was brought to the city about 4 years ago, and it was approved at that time, and then because of various issues, they didn't move ahead with it, but they went ahead and rerouted the alignment of the ditch at that time. And since then is when the issue has come up. And that was something that the church did. And that's why we're asking them to just basically, if you put it back to the way it was previously, as far as we knew, there was never an issue before. So it's this rerouting that has occurred in the last 3 to 4 years that has kind of spurred this whole conversation.
Are we talking about property that's on Abraham?
That's where the original issue was. Yes.
And I remember all of that.
Oh, yeah.
That was a significant problem. The issues that the city did on the church's property, did that resolve the problem?
Well, we've had some success with it. It tends to kind of depend on how much vegetation has grown up in the interim. So as long as it's been maintained, it has done well. But I haven't been out there in several years as far as it being an issue. So I think it's working a lot better than it did previously.
So prior to the church doing the rerouting, it seemed to be resolved.
Well,
I think it was extremely resolved from what I've heard in the past.
Sure.
Are you saying that the church has made it worse now because they changed the ditch?
Well, so there are two areas here, and the area you're talking about on Abraham, that's upstream, and that's actually.
But that's not the one that's directly that we're talking about.
No, in this picture, if you look at the brown house in the upper right-hand corner, it's actually a house that fronts on Lincoln Street. And that's a house that's had issues in the last 3 to 4 years since the ditch has been rerouted. And the rerouting is all taking place there on the right side of the screen. You can see how it there's a dark line that comes and then takes a hard right over to Lincoln Street right away. That's the rerouting. The Abraham stuff has been upstream and is not going to be affected one way or the other as far as this project goes.
Okay. It seems to me that the church has been very cooperative and letting the city get on their property and work out this solution for some other property. Is that not a way that we can work with them to give them that same concern? And maybe provide them this drainage. You want a map that shows the drainage improvements. Is that what you want?
Well, I was unaware that they went out there and did these improvements here recently. So I don't think any solution has to be costly. I mean, it could already be addressed as far as I know with what they've done out there. So it's possible that it's a moot point.
So it might be, but what I'm saying is, if it's not, is it possible, because they have allowed us to come on their property, that we can work with them and take care of that problem?
I mean, it just really, as far as my oversight in the city, it just becomes whether or not the issue with the neighboring property owner is addressed or not. I mean, if the board would wish to get other departments involved to kind of actually do improvements as part of that, that would.
Yeah, I don't know if we have that legal right, but apparently we had a legal right to go on their property and do some other things. So that's what I'm saying.
Sure.
The other thing, isn't it wonderful that we have two churches that have so much traffic that we're concerned? I think that is a wonderful thing in this city. Now, I know when I was on the planning commission, there is certain, so many feet that driveways have to be apart. Was this driveway that exists in this, I don't know why it's even there, because there wasn't anything there, but was it designed prior to the planning commission making that?
I think that was put in by RDOT when they redid the Sherry Whitlock that frontage, and I think that was back in maybe 2002 or 2003. It was many years ago. I don't know, what the guidelines were at that point in time, or if it would even been over the oversight of the planning commission because it was part of the RDOT project. So I don't know the history on that, but it's been there probably, as far as I'm aware, since that project was done by RDOT.
But city staff seems to think that is a very big problem of turning.
Well,
when I look at it, I see the original driveway where I'm presuming is their sanctuary right now, that people are coming out of that and they can go right or left, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And when they build the new structure, they'll come out the existing drive that we're talking about, and they can turn right or left. So there still is the problem of, even on their own side of the street, doing this, correct?
Well, they wouldn't cross the same path at that point, because if you're turning.
But if one is coming this way and want to come across, and one is going to come one is going east and one is going west, you're still going to be kind of crossing each other, correct?
Well, if you were, and it'd be easier to draw. If you were in the Eastern Drive, the one that's existing and that has the asphalt, and you were turning right, you would turn in that immediate lane. Whereas if you were turning out the other one, you would get into the turn lane. So you wouldn't occupy the same lane at the same time. Whereas if coming across the street, you would
Right.
occupy the same lane at the same time, the turn lane.
So the drive where the new structure is proposed is the only way to get traffic out from that new structure. It doesn't flow around to the other existing drive.
Not with this phase of the project. That's correct.
I'm trying. Thank you. But I do think it would be, if we could work some way to help them out on the drainage, as they have helped us.
Mayor?
Yes, Brad.
Sager has three ways of exit, and I'll just go back to what I said before. I think on number 5, I have no doubt that the city can work with the church, as just stated. And churches are growing in Siloam. The town is wet. I don't know what we're even talking about anymore. Let's get this project off the ground. I'm ready to make a motion.
All right. Make your motion.
Oh, Mr. Mayor, make a motion to approve resolution 33-20, authorizes significant development permit for 1611 Sherry Whitlock Drive, subject to planning commission's recommended conditions of approval.
Second.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
are we not
Marla?
going to include any comment about the drainage
That's included.
on that motion?
It is.
That's included.
I know it's down there on 4 or 5, but us helping the church in any way that we work with them.
Man just gave his word.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
I'm wondering if I could get Mr. Burns to approve that resolution to read recommended conditions of approval, number 1 and number 2, excluding 3, 4, and 5.
Thank you.
Second that.
I stand with the planning commission. I think I've made that clear at the last time we disagreed on a motion. Mr. Mayor, we
Right.
sat at a workshop with the planning commission. We gave them a job to do. We all agreed. And when they bring it to us, we're questioning the planning commission that is their main job, and it is paid. So I guess I'm kind of old school that way. I mentioned chain of command with Chief Gilbert, and I know the people on the planning commission, they do good work, and I don't believe there's any hardship on New Life Church.
Okay, so you haven't made you haven't seconded because
I did.
Did you second it? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, I missed that.
We are not addressed, we have taken out 3. That's not part of it, correct?
I think Brad's
Take it
was
out
all
anything.
5.
Planning commission.
Oh, he said the planning commission. The planning
is
commission is at
striking
the
3.
bottom.
Was striking 3?
Yes, sir.
Striking 3. Okay, so it would stand as recommend with the recommendations 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, with number 3 being struck. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So far.
But
If I may, it's the same recommendation the planning commission made to you.
Yes.
I don't want the board to get caught up in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Gotcha.
Staff made 5 recommendations to the planning commission. The planning commission made 4 recommendations, conditions of approval to the board. And Mr. Director Burns's motion is to approve the planning commission's recommendation.
All right. That's the way that's the motion in the second that we have, correct?
that is what I thought we were doing.
Okay.
I-
Okay.
I guess I should have said something about, I do wish the city would help them with the drainage, but we'll just leave it as it is.
Is there further discussion on the motion? All right, then we'll vote on the motion to approve as stated on Resolution 33-20. Roll call?
No.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Yes.
The motion is approved. Next is Resolution 34-20, encouraging, stating again, encouraging use of masks in relation to COVID-19 pandemic. Philip?
Mr. Mayor and Board. So most of you know, and I won't read the whole memo, but back in March, the governor issued his executive order declaring a statewide public health emergency due to the outbreak of COVID-19. In May of this year, he extended that previously declared emergency through June the 19th, and then on June the 18th, he further extended that emergency for another 60 days through August the 18th. Throughout this whole process, Arkansas, and especially Northwest Arkansas, we have seen, Brendan, we have seen cases of COVID rise. And with the board's permission, I would like to play a 7-minute video from Dr. Joe Thompson, President and CEO of the Arkansas Center for Health Improvement. Every week I sit in a video conference with Dr. Thompson and the Arkansas Municipal League, and we are constantly struggling and looking at the cases and how to try to address this. And before Friday, the Arkansas Municipal League was recommending that municipalities adopt a resolution encouraging the public to wear a mask and encouraging businesses that are impacted or subject to a directive by the Arkansas Health Department to enforce those directives. And with the board's pleasure, if you would just bear with me for 7 minutes, Brendan.
Thank all of you for joining week 14, and we're on this COVID trip together. We're not quite exactly sure where we're going to end up, but we're going to end up together, and glad to be with you again. The coronavirus, as we've been talking about, is a new virus. I'm going to try to vary our presentation a little bit each week so that we keep some new stuff coming in response to some of the questions that you've had over the past few weeks. We've added some things today also. We do continue to lead the world in the number of cases and the number of deaths. This is astounding that our nation is bearing the greatest burden from this coronavirus. We are starting now to see it impact not only our health, but also our mobility. On the next slide, you see the difference in corona cases per day for the United States compared to the European Union. We now have 40 to 45,000 new cases diagnosed each day, where the European Union, with a third more people than we have citizens, has only 4,000 new cases a day. They do not have any different drug. They don't have any different strategy. It's just they are being much more compliant with social distancing and mask wearing than we are here in the United States. And this led earlier this week to the European Union banning travel from the United States to those countries in Europe. They'll revisit that decision in 3 weeks, but they are safeguarding their nations from the unrelenting and out of control spread of the virus in our nation. This next slide you've seen before. We're now at 2.6 million cases, over 128,000 deaths. Just a week ago, when we were last together, there have been 300,000 new cases and 6,000 new deaths. We are now on a pace where we're having about 40 to 45,000 new cases per day. This is affecting Arkansas. We are now up over 20,000 cumulative cases, almost 6,000 active cases. We now have 275 people in the hospital, 72 on the ventilator, and we are approaching the 300 number in terms of deaths for Arkansans. When we look at the regions, Northwest Arkansas continues to be a high-risk region with 3.5 people per 1,000 citizens in that region actively infected. You will see Central Arkansas has now crossed the threshold of 1 per thousand. Last week we were at about 0.9 per thousand, or less than 1 per thousand individuals. And you see in the western part of the state, 2 per thousand. The northeastern part of the state's actually come down some. They were over 2 per thousand last week. So we are now up in the 1 or 2 per thousand for each of our trauma systems, with the exception being the north central mountain area. When we look at the doubling rate, we talked about this before, how many days does it take for the number of coronaviruses, hospitalizations, or deaths to double? The next slide is a little bit of a complicated slide, but you'll remember the gray bars on the far left. The steepest gray line is a doubling every day, the second every 2 days, the third every 3 days, the diagonal line, gray line every week. You'll see Arkansas's rate is starting to steepen. Washington and Benton County are starting to flatten just a little bit. They were on a doubling of every week. Pulaski is still on a doubling about every 2 weeks, and you see the new counties, Phillips, Crawford, Sebastian, Drew, Grant, they're now doubling every week, and this is after they've already had 10 cases. So they are starting to actually rack up the number of cases in those counties also. Now, from the governor's press conference last week and from the UAMS model, this is what I think is most sobering. Up to June 23rd, which is the last time that the governor released information from the model, there were about 16,000 infections. You'll remember today we're almost at 21, or we're over 21. Their estimates for September is that we could have as many as 133 active infections, 3,300 hospitalizations, almost 1,000 ICU admissions, and almost 700 people on ventilators. That's the average estimate. The worst case estimate would surpass our capability for our healthcare system. I think it's increasingly clear that the transmission is not happening predominantly in older Arkansans. This is a breakdown of the Arkansas case distribution by age. If you add up children 0 to 17, young adults 18 to 24, and those 25 to 44, 60%, over 60% of all of the cases are in the younger age population. Many of these individuals don't have symptoms, don't become severely sick, but they are the transmitting source that is of most concern now across our state. When we go to the new positive cases, you've seen these before. I'll go fairly quickly. They're predominantly in the community. We occasionally have a correctional facility outbreak, but most of these cases now, over 500 a day, are in the community. The trend lines you'll see, we had a pretty significant spike last weekend. We've come down some, or last week we've come down since last weekend. Obviously there's concern about what's going to happen here. The community average is tracking the total average. When we look at the daily positive cases, we are now up above 500, up above 5,000 daily active cases. This is putting a strain on the contact tracing capability. If you think that each contact has 2 to 3 each positive case has 2 to 3 contacts that you have to track down, the health department wakes up having to track 15,000 people down with 5,000 active cases. Our percent positive also has inched up, and on a few days have actually crossed the 10% line. On average now we're at about 7%. The 2 red bars are because the data may not be completely in. When we look at the hospitalizations per day, this is also an important marker of our capacity, and it is going up. It's flattened off a little bit, but we're at a much higher level than we were a week ago or 2 weeks ago. I can remember when we were approaching the 100 threshold and had concern. We're now approaching the 300 threshold. Of those hospitalized, these are people that are significantly ill from COVID-19. 13% die. 20% are still in the hospital, and about 2/3 have been discharged. So this is a serious illness when it hits you hard, and it does take a number of individuals out. For those individuals on the ventilator, and this is the next slide, we have an increasing number of people on the ventilator with over 75 now each day since earlier in March. If you are affected severely enough to go onto a ventilator, almost half of those individuals die. Let me say that again. If you are ill enough to go to the hospital and need to be put on a ventilator, almost half those individuals expire and succumb to the threat of COVID-19.
So, as I stated, every Thursday I'm on this webinar with Dr. Thompson and the Arkansas Municipal League, and it fascinates me to continue to see the rise in the numbers, and I think we all should be fascinated by that. In working with the mayor and the Arkansas Municipal League, prior to Friday, the Arkansas Municipal League had proposed a resolution encouraging people to wear masks. And that is the resolution that you have before you tonight as Resolution 34-20. On Friday of last week, the governor announced his working with the Arkansas Municipal League, which they did not disclose to everybody, an ordinance mandating the wearing of masks. We have reviewed that ordinance. It doesn't have any teeth. In my opinion, it is not much different than the resolution encouraging individuals to wear a mask. But I think it's important that you as a board take a stand to encourage people to wear masks and those who can wear masks to do that. And the resolution that you have before you tonight basically states that you, as the city board, strongly encourage all of those who may safely wear facial coverings to do so, and also to strongly encourage all businesses that are subject to a health department directive requiring their patrons to wear masks to do so, to require their patrons to wear masks. It's an encouragement, it's a resolution, shows that you stand in this, where you take a stand on this issue. It is not a mandate in any way, shape, or form. It is strictly a resolution, strongly encouraging, and with that, I'll be available for any questions. I would say a couple of weeks ago, I talked to you about the fact that we don't have active case numbers. We still don't have active case numbers. The Arkansas Municipal League is looking into that. I asked them again today in another web conference that I'm on with them every Tuesday. They hope to have an announcement on Thursday about the possibility of cities getting active case numbers. I do see quarantine case numbers, which is not active. We can't get an issue of what that exactly means from the health department, but I assume it means active cases and people who have maybe been exposed and had a test and they've said you need to go home and quarantine yourself. So it's not active case numbers. But we continue to see those quarantine cases rise within Siloam Springs. Back at the beginning of May, we had 5 total cases, 4 in the city, within the city. All 5 of them had a Siloam Springs address. Beginning of June, on June 5th, we had 17, 9 of which were in the city. At the end of June, we had 43, 41 were in the city. In the beginning of July, we had 40 and 38 were in the city, and the last numbers I saw were 38 total and 35 within the city. Again, these are quarantine cases. Doesn't mean they're active cases, but there's some number within that are active. So with that, again, I'll be available for any questions, and we would ask you to approve Resolution 34-20. Thank you.
Thank you, Philip. Any comments from the audience? Ma'am, step up to the mic and state your name and address, please. Get in front of the mic.
My name is Rhonda Hostler, and I live at 2535 Orchard Hill Road. I've been a registered nurse for 26 years, and I am here tonight to request you to make it a mandate, requirement, whatever word you would like to use, for everyone to wear a mask while out in the public in Siloam Springs. First, I want to make it clear that this is not a political issue. This is a virus that we currently do not know everything about. If you think about it, a year ago at this time, we had never even heard of COVID-19. What we do know is that it's a terrible virus that is easily passed from one person to the next. We have no cure or vaccine. Over 25,000 people in Arkansas have contracted this disease, and as of today, our death rate is 301 people so far. People have lost their jobs, they've lost their businesses, and they've lost their lives. This is not going to simply go away. In order to stop this virus, or at least to slow the spread, we must change our lifestyle. I think that's a problem that most of us in our city do not understand. One way of doing this is to provide layers between each one of us. The more the layers we have, the more we can decrease the spread. Me wearing a mask is one layer. Me and you guys being 6 feet apart is another layer. And then when you wear a mask, that again is another layer. And avoiding, of course, large gatherings and good hand washing also adds additional protection. In a perfect world, we would all listen to the professionals or the experts telling us what to do. But if you'd like to take a quick trip to Walmart, you will see simply people are refusing to do so. Most of us will have little to no symptoms if we get this disease. However, those who are elderly or who have health problems could suffer greatly. We have heard from Dr. Fauci today that statistics are showing that, the statistics that Mr. Patterson has shown, that the younger generation is now showing that they are too getting and having severe reactions to it. The World Health Organization at this point is saying as for today that this may be an airborne. Before they thought it was a contact, now it's an airborne. In other words, this particle floats in the air for more hours than they thought before. Give our local businesses the right to refuse services for those who refuse to wear the mask. This would be not only protect their employees, but other patrons as well. We both have tough jobs to do. My job is to keep teaching the public and to keep hearing that it's God-given right not to wear a mask. But your job is to try to help protect us while we get ahead of this whole situation. I'm just simply asking we do whatever we possibly can to encourage our people in Siloam Springs to wear masks. Mandate it, whatever we need to do, because it's not going to go away. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Anyone else? Being no further comments, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and or question of staff.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Lisa.
I like that we are encouraging people to wear masks. My family and I wear masks no matter where we go. My daughter has one fully functioning lung. The other has lots of damage. It's actually collapsed. And the great thing about Siloam is that people have called me and said, you know what? I've been in contact with somebody that has the corona. If I don't come up and speak to you, I'm not being rude. It's because I care about, I know you're in that situation. And even though they don't wear a mask, they avoid me. So I do see that people are trying to protect people that they know are high risk. And my daughter is high risk. She's only 3 years old. And so I like the idea that we are encouraging people to wear the mask.
Carol?
Well, you can see we're all wearing masks. I wear one every day. I wear one wherever I go. Half the time I'm wearing it in the car by myself because I forget to take it off. And I am wanting to encourage the people or the public, our citizens, to wear a mask, be healthy, stay alive. I don't think, at one time I thought, let's mandate this. But the problem with a mandate is there is no way to enforce it. And if you can't enforce it, what is the use of having a mandate? But I like the idea that at least Siloam Springs is taking the initiative to have a resolution to encourage the public to wear a mask, to encourage the businesses to have their patrons wear a mask and their staff wearing a mask. Now, if they choose not to do that, then I'm probably not going to go there because I want to go where I feel safe. So I am for this resolution, and I don't know if we can do anything more than that we could actually enforce.
Mr. Mayor?
Mindy?
I asked the administrator to ask the Main Street and Chamber to maybe do a little polling of businesses. And it was kind of interesting, some of the information that we got back. The two questions were, as a business member, are you in favor of wearing masks? And as a citizen in Northwest Arkansas, are you in favor of masks being required? The responses were a little bit different based on whether it was the Chamber or Main Street. The Chamber got 99 responses. 48% said that they were in favor of wearing masks as a business member. 54% said, or 48% said they were, and as a citizen, 46% said they were. Main Street respondents actually were a little higher in requiring masks as business members and as Northwest Arkansas citizens. The encouraging thing there is that we've got some business leaders that are wanting to wear those masks and are wanting to encourage that of their patrons. I went into one establishment today, and there was a sign outside. Well, I ordered takeout, and at the end of my order, she said, "Okay, don't forget to bring your mask." I said, "Okay, that's fine." So I went in with my mask on, and I just asked, "Are you getting much pushback from your patrons?" And she said, "A few don't really like to wear them, but we offer them and they'll take them kind of begrudgingly. But overall, yeah, people are wearing masks." So I think if there is that expectation, for the most part, they will. So according to the polls, our very small polls that we did, there are slightly more business owners and representatives of businesses in favor of requiring masks. Even if the reasons for the fear people have about this virus are exaggerated, and I think some people think that the fear is exaggerated, the fear is still there. People want to feel safe, and many feel the best way to do that is to require masks. But even with the recent executive order that the governor passed, allowing cities to adopt a model ordinance, we still really don't have the authority to mandate and enforce mask wearing. Whether we are given that authority at some point to require a mask, and that would be by the governor, because otherwise I think we could subject ourselves to a lawsuit as a city. So whether we end up being allowed to require masks or not, I encourage citizens on both sides of the issue to take advantage of the many opportunities businesses have provided during this pandemic. Opportunities that really do give you choices. If a mask is required at a particular business and you don't want to wear one, chances are that business already offers pickup or delivery, or perhaps they would be willing to provide that if you ask them. If a mask isn't required at a particular business and it makes you uncomfortable to be around those without mask, the same thing applies. Take advantage of those services that will keep you safe and will keep you away from the people that aren't wearing masks. So I'm very thankful that the businesses have really tried to be accommodating to people on both sides of the issue. So my question to the city is, with this resolution, which I support, what does that mean? We are going to encourage citizens and businesses to use masks. We can put it on Facebook. What else does that look like?
Staff and I were discussing that today, and I have some additional information that I'll go ahead and share with you. Director Smiley had sent me some information on what they were doing in Topeka, and I don't remember exactly the name of the program.
It's called Promise. I think it was a Promise, and they were also doing it in Lawrence, Kansas.
Rogers is doing the same, and Springdale is also doing, Rogers is doing Keep Rogers Safe or something, hashtag Keep Rogers Safe, and Springdale Chamber's doing Springdale something. So we've been looking at the possibility of doing a voluntary program to promote the wearing of masks. We haven't ironed out all of the wrinkles yet, but if we can, it's likely that hopefully next week we could kick it off where businesses who want to require the wearing of a mask in their business could pledge and sign a pledge that they will do that. And for that matter, residents could sign a pledge to do that. And we would give them some sort of promotional 11 by 17 or some sort of color poster that they could post in their windows so that you would know if they have signed the pledge or not. It would all be voluntary, but we would promote those businesses on a new web page on our city's web page as to these are the businesses and maybe even the residents who have, I don't know if we can do all the residents' names, but at least the businesses that have pledged to comply with the ADH guidelines. I've recently ordered additional masks, and I am considering maybe trying to provide some masks to each one of those businesses that does that. I'm waiting to see the masks where they come in and what kind of packaging they're in, but to try to promote that. To one comment that was made by the public. Is it Hessler?
Hostler.
Thank you. I believe today, without the without the ordinance mandating it, I believe today if a business decided that they wanted to put up a sign that says, "You need to wear a mask to come to our business." It's the old no shirt, no shoes, no mask, no service. And if I decided that I didn't want to comply with that and I wanted to go in that business and make a stink about it, I believe the business would have the right to call the police, and the police would have the right to say, "Sir, Philip, you need to leave or you're going to be charged with trespassing," because the business has the right to not serve me. There's no guarantee. It's a private business. We have the right here at City Hall to say the same thing. We have the right to say, if we want to, if you don't have a mask, you can't come into City Hall. We haven't done so. We have put up the shields, and we have done everything we can to provide the 6-foot distancing. The problem with the ordinance as it's written is it says that you will follow the health department guidelines. The health department says the general public should wear a face covering in all indoor environments where they are not exposed to non-household members, and distancing of 6 feet or more cannot be assured. The general public should also wear coverings at all outdoor settings where they are exposed to non-household members unless there is ample 6-foot space. So even if you pass the ordinance, the argument is I could be a business owner and say, we're going to force everybody to maintain 6-foot distancing. We're not going to force them to wear a mask. So, and the ordinance says the only teeth we have is the law enforcement would support those businesses and would encourage and educate the public. And that's the only teeth. So that's no different, in staff's opinion, than encouraging. Back to your question, I'm sorry for the long-winded answer. You know me. The other thing I want to try to do is to get this, if you pass this resolution, is to try to put it out there. We're going to probably send that to every business that has a business license. That is a brick and mortar business, either via email or the mail. And I believe we can charge that expense off to the COVID-19 and possibly get that expense recovered through the CARES Act and a few other options. But I want to get the information out rather than the normal just, it's a resolution, we passed it, we moved on.
Now, one question I do have about restaurants in particular, and I think restaurants are subject to ADH guidelines anyway, right? There has been a mandate from the governor that restaurants require masks, correct?
Yes.
And so regardless of this other ordinance, our law enforcement can be called in that kind of case.
I would say that I think the best way to go about dealing with a restaurant that is not complying with the Arkansas Health Department requirements of mandating that patrons wear a mask until they are served is to call the Arkansas Health Department.
Okay.
The Arkansas Health Department, the only thing that I think the police department could do is, again, go have a conversation that they're required to do that. There might be a small fine, a misdemeanor fine that we could cite them for. But I believe the health department has a bigger stick, and that is the restaurant license. And I would submit to you that if the restaurant continued to not comply and the health department received enough, and I already know of a few cases where the health department shut the restaurant down for failure to comply.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor. It's Brad. I received an email, I don't know if anybody else did, so that person, 4 paragraphs later, I'll summarize it. They walk in faith and not fear. And so for folks that think that way, it's a free America. I'm not going to go down that road with you. I back this. It's simply encouraging folks. That's all it is. Having said that, I was just in Rogers recently and ate at a restaurant, which I had to make a reservation, and
The tables were all spaced, and it was all fantastic. And I left there, and I was going to purchase some UV clothing for outdoor activities and shop around. And couldn't get myself to go into either of the 3 stores we drove through the parking lot because the lack of masks. So we are simply doing a paper tiger that has a lot of good intent, and we're hoping, some people are praying, that citizens will follow those guidelines. But that is all we can simply do. Americans are going to do what Americans do. We kick the Brits out, and we do silly things sometimes. And right now, some of our citizens are doing silly things. They're your neighbors. You may go to church with them. We're going to live with them every day. We're continuing, I think we've been doing this for a while, encouraging. In fact, I didn't wear a mask at one meeting just to expose the light. You know, people are just saying, I'm not wearing a mask. And so this is good intent. I'm behind it 1,000%. But we are going to have folks that cross the line, that shop in our town from Oklahoma. We're going to have Arkansans, and we're going to have folks from out of town. They just will not wear a mask. But I applaud us supporting AML and supporting Asa. He's been a great governor for whatever party you belong to. I think we all can agree on COVID-19. He's gone above and beyond. Our industry, which we need those tax dollars greatly, have made great adjustments. But when those workers go home, I know, because some of them might be in my neighborhood, they do not follow the guidelines. But they follow the guidelines when they walk through that threshold of that door to their facility. This is not going away. This will be an ongoing battle. And we're doing the right thing, but this is the limit of what we can do. That is all.
Yes,
I just
Lisa?
want to tell Rhonda, thank you for coming and saying what you have to say and caring about our community like you do. So,
Mr. Mayor,
Bob.
I appreciate a nurse's opinion because my daughter is one, and you can rest assured that Papa got an assortment of these. Matter of fact, I got this pretty one here she made for me. You know, we talked about the outdoor warning system, and you're darned if you do and you're darned if you don't. If you turn it on too fast or too slow or whatever, you're criticized for it. We allowed fireworks in the city and said you can't have bottle rockets. I saw more bottle rockets in the last 4 or 5 days, I think, than I've seen in the last 10 years. There's always going to be somebody out there pushing the chain, you know, and I guess if they want to early push up daisies from 6 feet down, that's going to be their choice. But I don't. I'm very much appreciative of Mr. Patterson having that video. I had talked with him a couple of days ago about maybe having some of our own physicians here in town come to us and maybe making that same comment. And he had this, which is quite adequate. But you know, you have a real hard time making people do what's right, especially when you give them a choice. You know, Director Burns said, you know, have faith and all of this. Yeah, you can have faith, but, you know, that doesn't necessarily mean, you know, I've got faith in the, what do you call it, ground fault deal that I have on my hot tub. But I don't throw an electrical cord in there while I'm in there just to make sure that's going to work. You know, I'll take the word of the electrician that says it'll work. You know, he's paid to do that, and I'll be safe. You know, as I'm safe wearing a mask. Do I like them? No. Every time I try to crawl out of the car without one, I've got a sweet lady beside me that says, here, and on it goes. And I appreciate that because I'm old. I'm 77 years old, and I'm a diabetic, and I fall in that suspect category. I don't know whether I'd ever catch anything if I went out amongst 50 people that had tested positive. That's the good Lord's provision. If I did, I did. If I didn't, I didn't. So, but I wear the mask just in case. If they don't have one, then I've got one buffer. If they've got one, I've got two buffers, just like you explained a few minutes ago. So, I'm sorry if people maybe feel the way I do sometimes. I don't like people making rules for me, but, I also wear a seatbelt. I haven't had any accidents, but I'm not going to have one just to make sure my seatbelt's working. So I would encourage, I'm all in favor of this. It takes a mandate. I got lots of emails about we're not in favor of the mandate, meaning everybody's got to wear one everywhere. That's not what this covers. But I do think sometimes one of the responsibilities of city government is to protect its people. That doesn't necessarily just mean with the police department, and the fire department, and the EMS department, and those things alone. It also means trying to encourage them to have a little bit of extra brain power when it comes to preventing a disease spread like this. So I just encourage everyone to, just hide your pride for a little while, and the quicker we do that and wear a mask, the faster this thing's going to be over with. If we want to just prolong it, then don't wear your mask, and I'll pray for you and hope you don't get the disease. But if you do, Lord help you. You were warned. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right. Anyone else? Yes, Reed.
Yes, I'll get to be the bump in the road tonight. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The Declaration of Independence states the principles on which our government and our identity as Americans are based. The ideology of wearing a mask or not has introduced a whole new prejudice. Those who don't wear a mask ridicule those who do wear a mask. And on the other side, those who wear a mask want to shame those without a mask, saying they don't care about others. This breeds disunity, even hatred. Don't get me wrong. I believe God is alive and He still sits upon His throne. First of all, God alone has given us life. It doesn't matter if you believe in God or not, because God believes in you. Second of all, God has equipped each of us with our own superpower. But because God does speak to us daily, and everyone does have this superpower, many have laid it down. Third of all, apathy is the kryptonite to this superpower. May we understand the importance of and utilize the power of common sense. I ask each one of us, discover the passion born in your heart, not from hatred. Believe in it, but don't bully everyone toward your belief. It must come from each individual heart. I am but one voice of 7 in this checks and balances. I am not here to persuade, but to define my position. I live in the best community in the world. I will live in the freedom given, but not in rebellion or disruption, but wearing a mask can be a part of the solution. But a mask has not and will not save us. Common sense must rule before authentic change begins. This resolution takes us to the brink of the overstepping of our liberty. I cannot support that. I will be voting no. Thank you.
Mayor,
Brad.
make a motion.
Okay. Well, you have time. Okay. Go ahead, Brad.
Motion to approve resolution 34-20, encourage the public to wear masks, encourage business to require patrons to wear masks if subject to directives issued by Arkansas Department of Health, all in an effort to help curb the COVID-19 virus.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to approve?
I would just like to say one thing. My husband's clinic that I work in, we do require our patients to come into our clinic with a mask. They cannot come in without a mask. Our son is an MD over in Rogers. Their clinic requires a mask. I have several other relatives, very close relatives, that are MDs that work in other communities, and they all require a mask. And several of them right now are working in COVID departments. So for me, I cannot require our patients to wear a mask and not approve this resolution. So I will be voting for it. That's why I am voting for it. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Live stream's down there.
Goes live stream down. Apologize. No other comments? No other discussion? All right. We have a motion and a second. We've had discussion. We'll vote on the motion to approve on resolution 34-20. Roll call.
Yes.
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 No.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Thank you. Thank you for everybody for your comments, and I know they all come from the heart, and I think we want the same thing, is for people to behave themselves. If everybody was behaving themselves, the mask might not be as, in my opinion, needed as much as otherwise. All right. Resolution 35-20, amending procedures and organizational matters of the Board of Directors. Listen close to those folks of you who are still here, because agenda like we had tonight is exactly what we're addressing that would really help things out a lot. So as far as procedure for this board and for our public, to make me encourage more people to show up if they didn't think they were going to be here for all night. Philip.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board. So back on June the 16th, you discussed the idea of having a consent agenda, and one of the things that we discussed, that if you wanted to go that route, you needed to amend your procedure and organizational matters that were adopted back in January of this year. Staff has proposed amendments to those procedural rules, and you can see that in the memo, where in section, I believe it is, if I can call it up, section 6, under presentation of agenda items, we would add a consent agenda to the overall agenda. We would submit minutes under that, any appointments, contracts and approvals, and any other routine resolutions, not unlike a significant development plan. The thing that you have to remember is, as part of that consent agenda, any item placed on it may be removed at the request of one board member No second or vote is required. All you have to do is say, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item B, C, and D, and those items are removed. Once the consent agenda is approved by a simple vote, majority vote of the board, there's typically no debate, no discussion on those items, and then immediately following that, usually those items that have been removed are then discussed one by one and voted on one by one. So you have before you a resolution adopting an amendment to your procedural rules, and staff is available for any questions.
Thank you, Philip. You concised that down perfectly. Good job. Thank you. Any comments from the audience, from the public? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and/or questions of staff.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Carol.
I'm the one that asked to bring this forward during one of my director's reports, and I am so thankful and I appreciate that Philip and staff have brought this forward. I have worked with the consent agenda, and I think we've talked about it, how it works, and I believe it makes us a little bit more organized, but yet we still have the opportunity, if there's something that we want to discuss, we can pull it out and bring it forward. So I do approve this resolution.
The idea that one person can pull it off eliminates a lot of discussion as to why you're going to want to pull it off. You're going to have that opportunity if that one person says it. You got the opportunity to discuss and make your point as it goes forward. I like it.
So you'll have to get used to it. There'll be a couple of missteps probably, but in pulling it off, you don't have to say a reason why. You just,
Right.
I want to pull this one, and this one, and then after that's the rest of the items that are remaining or dealt with, then those discussions happen.
Yes, Carol.
We've discussed this before. I move that we approve Resolution 35-20, amending the board's adopted rules related to procedures and organizational matters of the Board of Directors.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there further discussion on the motion to approve? All right, being none, we will vote on the motion to approve. Roll call?
Yes.
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 Motion is approved. Thank you. Last on the agenda, before we get further on down, but Resolution 36-20, recognizing and supporting police officers and law enforcement professionals. Philip?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Board. So this was requested by Directors Coleman and Hunt, and staff has prepared a resolution recognizing and supporting the police department. And just, if you'll bear with me for the public's benefit, the resolution basically says that the city supports law enforcement officers who act ethically and with integrity, recognizes the need for law enforcement officers to have the equipment, training, and resources that are necessary in order to protect the health and safety of the officers, acknowledges that police officers who have made the ultimate sacrifice should be remembered and honored, expresses support for the Siloam Springs Police Department to respect all individuals regardless of race or culture, and to adopt and emphasize constitutional, ethical, and unbiased law enforcement practices, and encourages the citizens of the city to remain aware of the essential mission that law enforcement personnel undertake in service to their communities, and to honor and respect those efforts. And staff would recommend that you approve.
All right. Any comments from the audience?
City Board members, before I begin, I must...
Name and address, please, Larry.
Oh, Larry Kennemore, 207 Western Hills Drive.
Thank you.
Before I begin, I must preface what I'm about to say with this statement. At the last meeting of the City Board, I left before Arthur Hurlburt made his statement on behalf of the Siloam Springs Chamber of Commerce concerning support for our law enforcement officers. And I commend him and the Chamber of Commerce for that statement. However, with this city, the board, and the chamber, the citizens want more than just lip service. As you probably know, one of our citizens of Siloam Springs, a woman named Haley Emmerich, recently made some pretty left-wing and radical statements at the Benton County Quorum Court meeting concerning their resolution, which is pretty similar to the one that you have here in support of the police. Here's her opening statement. If you vote for this resolution, you're not only showing your racism in this current climate, you're also voting against transparency, accountability, and personal and institutional improvements. After these statements, their resolution was tabled. As you can see, a resolution is only the beginning. And I want to thank board members Hunt and Coleman for proposing this resolution that is before you. However, since then, board member Hunt has had to justify why she proposed this resolution. What a sad day for this country in Siloam Springs when you have to justify what you believe. However, what is sad for Siloam Springs and this board is that our representative, Robin Lundstrom, has taken the initiative long before this board started to thank these police officers. And you can drop off gift baskets at the Chamber of Commerce right now, and there's going to be an upcoming parade that she's put together for our police officers. Siloam Springs is not like other parts of the United States. We're blessed as a police department that is well trained, equipped, and is responsive to Siloam Springs' need. Therefore, this board needs to be more proactive, like I have all these cities here around us that are doing all kinds of things for their police officers. Lastly, during this pandemic, your Siloam Springs Rotary Club fed every shift to the fire department for a month. Yet we've not seen a resolution from this board for what these first responders were and are subjected to during this crisis, putting their own and their family lives on the line every call they respond to. I'm suggesting that this board needs to be proactive in what they do. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. All right, any other comments from the board? Any other comments from the audience? Excuse me, Matt, I was about to talk too soon.
All right, Matt Firehobin, 414 South Wright Street. Is that all I need to mention? All right. Okay. Our nation is having a conversation right now about racism and policing, and I think we all know that the timing of this resolution is related. So here we are in our tiny little town, a town where we don't discuss that we used to be a sundown town, a town where our museum director, Don Warden, has shared multiple stories with me personally of racism against black people in our town. One of those stories was a mob of white people who terrorized black people in the middle of the night. No arrests were ever made. Siloam is also the town where my black roommate at John Brown University was detained by Siloam Springs police no less than 15 times in his first semester at John Brown University. And that was only 15 years ago. 12 years ago, I was arrested for obstructing government operations, which is a charge that officers love to use against anyone who challenges their authority. That officer, Brian Austin, was later promoted to captain. During his service in that position, I witnessed him remove his gun from his holster, joking that he was going to open a box with a gun because the box was being difficult to open. 2 years ago, I was handcuffed by a Siloam Springs police officer as I was leaving my business at midnight. The officer demanded that I present my driver's license. I was not driving. I detected that his demand seemed unusual, and I calmly stated that I would prefer not to present my driver's license and that I did not believe I had to by law. I ended up being correct. This caused the officer, though, to use physical force and push me up against a railing and place handcuffs on me. I had helped an employee report that same officer for misconduct a few months before my encounter. Is that related? Was that why he was doing it? I don't know. But his police report included false statements. And I can prove that they're false because I have the dash cam footage to support it. Chief Wilmeth the next day tried to get the officers to come up with a criminal charge to file against me. I know that because I FOIA'd all of the information related to the arrest. The reason that Chief Wilmeth wanted to do that is because the law does not allow an officer to use physical force without certain criteria being met. I'm not going to go through all of the criteria, but the most important one being that the requirement that sufficient evidence that a crime has been committed, is being committed, or is going to be committed before an officer uses force. I share this to state that I've seen how the system works to incriminate the innocent, and that national statistics show that injustice such as this occurs at a higher rate against Black and brown Americans. There was also a recent encounter between an immigrant in Siloam Springs and a police officer. Where the officer harassed this individual and accused them of having fake immigration documents. The stories of racial discrimination against immigrants in our town are as plentiful as the number of immigrants we have, which is somewhere around 20 to 25% of our population. For a number of reasons, Latinos and other immigrants do not always speak out about the racial discrimination they experience. When I was opening my business downtown, I went to request a permit for a neon sign, and an officer that I was speaking with said that the sign I wanted to create would be fine, as long as my sign did not look like something a Mexican would create. That's an officer in our town. 2 years ago, there were two individuals running for this board, and they were not white. If either one of them had been elected, they would have been the first minorities ever elected to this board of directors. Sadly, they both lost. One of them experienced racist attacks and harassment because they were running for the board, and they were asked to answer a question about racial injustice in our town. And they decided after this that this was not the community they wanted to be in, and they moved. Instead of passing this resolution, I would encourage you to listen, learn, and seek whether our community can make improvements in the way we police. That's the national conversation happening. I don't know if you guys have the data or information to show that we have police officers who do not discriminate, but the national information suggests that officers do across the board, across the country, and that these injustices occur far too often. A few weeks ago, I spoke with Captain Spicer.
Matt, I've asked you to wrap up, please.
You're
way over now.
I'm one paragraph from finishing. A few weeks ago, I spoke with Captain Spicer, and he agreed with me that we have an opportunity here in Siloam Springs to lead and show the nation that a small town in Arkansas can make significant changes, that we can listen, we can reflect, and work together to make these systemic changes in our community. He and I have not met to have that discussion yet, but I hope that this board will vote no on this unnecessary statement and instead join us in pursuing greater racial equity and inclusivity in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Any further comments from the audience? Being none, I'll turn it over to the board for comments and/or questions of staff.
Mayor,
Yes, Brad.
can I get Chief Gilbert up here real quick? I'll put you in the hot spot. So if you could, where your law enforcement background comes from, what's the demographics that the town or the area that you came from?
Where I grew up I was born in the Delta in Clarksville, Mississippi. Demographics probably 50-50. Grew up on the south side of Chicago. Moved to Tupelo where I served for 27 years. Demographic, our schools are probably 50-50, if not 60-40, black to white. Got a probably 10% Hispanic population, if that answers your question.
That's all I need. So, and I think we've all received emails. Right now I'm at 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 emails that reflect basically some of the concerns that Matt has. Director Coleman's was the initial request, and it is just in general support I like the resolution that reflects Siloam specifically and not so much federal, but because I think we're talking about Siloam right now. But why I mention this to Matt and the other folks that are out there live streaming that have very strong feelings, they've got emotions and concerns that I unfortunately don't have as a human being. Couldn't tell you why. But I know we have a new chain of command at the PD. And I stated that earlier with Marla. Not to cut you off, Marla, and there's a reason why we have that chain of command, that chain of command. And there'll be a trickle down in that. And I think Scott or Captain Miller is a great example. I've known him for a long time. We set up here, he was the FOP, and we started our local, and we debated with the city board about pay. Last year, I spoke with the city administrator. I'm sure those on the board at the time did, and we're concerned about pay. And he's working on a program to increase that pay. The officers need that increase in pay to provide them the downtime so they don't have to moonlight, because most of us in public safety moonlight to support because the pay is not where it needs to be. That downtime is crucial for that officer to spend family time or whatever time that is necessary for them to defuse so that officer can come back on the job and provide the service. And that service is a direct reflection. For those that have never worked in the chain of command, it is difficult. You have to bite your tongue. You are submissive to that chain of command. Being a police officer, I've never been one, but having been a fireman, behind closed doors, I have been extremely strong with the chain of command when I disagree and received numerous disciplinary actions for such things, and I never back down, so they spank you. And so for the police officers, I'm sure they express that, and the police chief guides that energy, creates that environment. And the reason I asked Chief Gilbert to bring that up, because obviously we have a new chain of command. He has worked in diverse environments. This town has a history. I'm only familiar with Siloam Springs starting in 1970 as a kid, and we came into town once a month because we lived over on Highway 10, and that's when you came to Siloam, was once a month. We do have a history. But it is not our future. It does not define us. It is not who we are today. I spoke a couple of meetings ago about a confrontation, or not a confrontation, an interaction with police officers. They defused that situation. It took 3 officers to make that happen. And I said that was a diverse environment. That person was an African American gentleman, and it was directly like any of us might have one time of our life. It was a family issue. They were having some family problems, and for those of you who've ever been divorced or been down a road like that, and it can be difficult and trying, and then throw COVID on top of that, and a lot of numerous factors. And they use the de-escalation technique. I applaud. I think we're forgetting the statement that Chief Gilbert made. I alluded to it earlier tonight. And the reason I'm rattling on right now is I just want to reassure the folks out there that are concerned about the past. I have no doubt that Chief Gilbert, his officers underneath his command, if you want a format or some form of communication, we've created a communication department in community development. I would ask you to reach out to them, and hopefully they can facilitate that. But there's just some areas at the end of the day that we're not going to agree upon. We have to support our officers. That's the bottom line. That is a low-pay, non-thankful job. If you've had a bad run-in with the law, you know, it's life. Life's hard. I can't make it easy for any of you. I love our entrepreneurs downtown. A lot of those entrepreneurs are concerned about the direction this nation is headed. That is not the direction that Siloam Springs is headed. I cannot change the past. I can change the future. If there's an issue at a department, we reach out to the city administrator. He makes the corrective action. He runs the city. He runs the departments. They've hired a new police chief. If you've not reached out to them, if you have not expressed your concerns, and if you did not listen to the statements that have been made in the past, then I would request that you contact them directly, and let's see if there's something new there. Things change. The river flows. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, Bob.
I don't think I can be quite as eloquent as Director Burns, but I do agree with a lot of his comments. A couple of weeks ago, when I asked to have this type of resolution made, since then I've gotten these same emails. I've gotten half a dozen of them or so, and I appreciate the people that wrote to me. Their concerns are quite valid for our country. And I realize that not every city and not every state in the United States is like Siloam Springs, Arkansas. When I asked this to be done, I wanted it to be done for the people in the police department in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, and that's how it's written. There's not a thing I can do to change the history that was mentioned in these emails that I received, with the exception of one thing. I can encourage people to learn from history. We don't teach history anymore, so we have a hard time doing that. But the history that I received in these emails, I'm very pleased that our city has learned from them. I'm not aware of some of the comments that were made of inappropriate behavior on the part of our police department. Those guys and gals are human. I would suspect that probably happens from time to time. But it doesn't hit the headlines in the newspapers. It doesn't rise to that kind of malfeasance in office, and I'm very, very proud of our officers and the training that they've received. I'm pleased very much with the statement that our chief made a couple of weeks ago, because I think that itself addressed a lot of the questions or the comments that were made in some of the emails I received, and you all probably got the same ones. But I can't solve the national problems. I wish I could. I'd do it in a minute. There wouldn't be any of them left tomorrow morning when we all wake up. I can't do that. One thing I can do is I can encourage people, if I ever had the contacts to do it, to come talk to our chief of police, to come talk to our officers and find out what kind of training and what kind of situations they go through. Maybe they can learn from that. Maybe they can be trained just by the training some of our own people do. So I'm glad someone more eloquent than I worded this resolution, because my verbiage would have been much better, and I acquiesced to Director Hunt because I know she had a good lot of input on that too, and I appreciate that. But I didn't write this for the United States. I didn't write it for every citizen. I asked it to be written for our men and women in Siloam Springs, Arkansas, of whom I think we can be extremely proud, and I support this 100%. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I too support this. I like to be able to go to sleep at night and know that if something happens, I can call the police and they'll be there to protect me. My brother-in-law lives in Houston. We went in that area to visit. Bars on the window, chain link fences, gates locked. We don't experience any of that. We walk on people's lawns. We ride our bikes on the sidewalks and on the bike paths. And we are so blessed. Yes, we had a bad history, but that history only comes back to haunt us when someone wants to bring it up. We have learned from it. We've progressed. And there's no need to discuss it. It's there. It's not going to go away. But if we learn from it, that's the best way to view it. So I am for this. I wish we could put the fire department in here, everybody else, because total support.
Carol?
We do. I have only lived here since 1990. I am sure we've had a history before I was here. I am sure things have happened in the past. I appreciate what Matt has to say. It's important that we listen and learn, but I also have to support our public servants and our police department. And that's what I am doing by supporting this. I am not saying I'm detracting from what might have happened with Matt or other people that he knows or some of our other residents, because it has happened. But we are in a different watch. I have faith in our chief that if we are having a problem, somebody, Matt, whatever, can go to our chief and get that resolved. If it doesn't, then I will say something, but I have to have some significant information that something has happened while on his watch. So I am in support of this, but I do appreciate you coming forward. Thank you. And thank to all of our police officers, our fire department, our EMS. Our staff is the best. Our departments are the best. This is the best community I have ever lived in. I haven't lived in a lot, but I didn't get transferred here. I chose to move here, and it was the best decision my husband and I ever made. Thank you.
Lisa?
I support this as well. I used to work at the police department, and I know there's people that make mistakes, and I know people are not perfect, but I do encourage, if anything happens, you're not stuck with going just to the police department. You have a whole team of people. You have Philip, you have the city board of directors, you have a whole team of people that will make sure that things are done right. And so I encourage, if you know somebody or if anything happens, I encourage you to go to the chief, but if you're not comfortable, not everybody's comfortable with that. Go to who you are comfortable with so that they can look into it. Because I know the chief, and I know a lot of people, Miller and who you mentioned earlier, I can't even think of his name, Spicer, and known him for years.
One's left.
Yeah, 20 years this July. But I know they care, and I know that they'll listen. And so I encourage, if you have a problem with our police department, to let us know. There might be some piece of information you don't know that we can help, or it may help them solve any issues that you may have. And so I encourage you just to reach out. But I do appreciate you speaking up.
Does Reed have anything to say? I can be last.
Reed?
I'm doing just fine, thank you.
I've gotten a lot of credit for this resolution, but it was really our Director Coleman that brought this up. I really only became involved because I wanted it to do a little bit more to support the police, or maybe the better way of putting it is show support in a different way. I do agree wholeheartedly that we need to show support for our police force. I also want to be sensitive to Siloam's diverse population. During this time of racial unrest that has resulted in some lacking trust in law enforcement across the nation, I believe that one way for us to provide support to our police officers is by showing our citizens that our police department is committed to protect all citizens, regardless of race, and as this resolution says, recognize the worth and diversity of individuals and cultures, showing neither undue favor or bias. And much of what is in the resolution related to that came from Chief Gilbert. The resolution expresses support and appreciation for our officers. It commends their work. It recognizes those who have made sacrifices in the line of duty, while also acknowledging the SSPD's commitment to respect all individuals regardless of race or culture, and to adopt and emphasize constitutional, ethical, and unbiased law enforcement policies and practices. During this particularly difficult time in our nation, police officers need to know they are supported, and citizens need to know they will be protected and treated fairly by those who are hired and to serve and protect Siloam. I hope the statements made in the resolution will have a positive impact on both the police force and the citizens. We have received some pushback today on this resolution from some who are concerned that it's the wrong response to the issues of racial injustice and the police reform they feel is essential to address the racial injustice. While it may not be perfect, it acknowledges our police department's commitment to treating all people fairly and justly, regardless of race, while also showing our police department that we support and appreciate their efforts during a time when the large number of good officers are being lumped in with a small number of bad officers. While I completely trust our police chief to not only be sensitive himself to our diverse population, but to also instill that in the officers he oversees, I feel that this resolution gives our citizens who may be struggling with law enforcement that sense of assurance that they will be protected fairly and justly, regardless of race and culture. So I support it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mindy.
Should I report you? Should I report you? Oh, so I'm going to make a motion.
No, I'm not going to let you.
Okay, you go
I'm
ahead.
going to let Bob do it first.
Okay.
I want Bob to make it, and I want you to second it.
Okay.
Okay?
I don't even remember I know how to do this anymore now.
That was a long time ago.
All right. Mr. Mayor, I move that we approve Resolution 3620, recognizing and supporting police officers and emphasizing constitutional, ethical, and unbiased law enforcement practices.
Motion and a second. We got
Second.
it. Thank you. Is there further discussion on the motion? Being none, we will vote on the motion to approve on Resolution 36-20. Roll call?
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion is approved. I'll be proud to sign it. Thank you. Staff report. It's getting late, Philip.
Mayor?
Yes, Planning Commission annual report, Philip.
So,
Or staff reports.
What I would like to do, because of the hour, is just if you have it, you have a copy of the commission's report that Ben has provided to you. If you have any questions over that, would be happy to answer that, or you can email me those questions rather than trying to wrap this up for you. You also have the May financials. Same thing. If you have any questions, you're welcome to contact myself or Christina. As it relates to the May financials, I have a litany of things to report, and I'm going to try to fast forward through them as quickly as I can, but there are a number of items that the public needs to hear. The primary election is August the 11th, and the last day to register to vote in that election is July the 10th. So we would encourage anyone and everyone to make sure that they're registered, and encourage everyone to get out and vote in the August 11th election. We had a $48,104.50 expenditure in the electric department for metal enclosures and ground sleeves for general line extensions. We had some discussion a couple of weeks ago about the transfer station and the hours. We have amended those hours to go back to the regular pre-COVID Saturday hours, which are 9 to noon. And then on June the 29th, we extended the hours from 8 a.m. To 1 p.m. to 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Monday through Friday. So we're still closing, I think, a little early in that, just to allow everybody to be able to sanitize everything where the public has been. Regarding what would have been spring cleanup, we talked about having a summer cleanup, but as we're moving so close to the fall cleanup, rather than have a summer cleanup, the transfer station is going to be open for free during the week of July 13th through the 18th for residents. You will need to bring a utility bill showing that you have a monthly trash fee on that bill, and also on Saturday, rather than the standard time of 9 to noon, it will be open through 3 p.m. on that Saturday to give everybody a chance to be able to bring any of their articles that would normally be picked up. Those acceptable items include appliances without Freon, furniture, mattresses, yard toys, etc. It does not include tires, electronics, paints, chemicals, household cleaners, batteries, those types of things. Those can be dropped off at the Benton County Drop-Off Center right next door to the transfer station. They're open on Tuesdays and Thursdays, 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. except for 30 minutes at noon. And they are also open on the third Saturday of each month, which is also July 18th. So hopefully, if you have things you need to drop off on July 18th, both of those facilities will be open, and both of them are free to residents. Fall cleanup is still scheduled for the beginning the week of October 19th on your trash pickup day. And then lastly, I wanted to bring to your attention a couple of things. The Siloam Springs Rodeo is planned to occur. The Riding Club did submit a plan to the Arkansas Health Department, and that plan was approved. The rodeo is going to take place on July 16th and 18th. There will be social distancing and mask wearing. They will have volunteers to do that. It's all up to them to be responsible to meet the requirements of the health department. There won't be a dance, there will not be a parade or a special needs rodeo. Staff has been working on Chautauqua Amphitheater, and we did submit a plan to the Arkansas Health Department as it relates to their directive for outdoor events. They have approved that plan, which basically limits the occupancy to 285 individuals. We created a grid layout that would keep 12-foot distancing between seating, anticipating where family groups would seat, and so we created large circles and separated them out. We haven't proceeded yet with developing a programming as far as events. It's something we're going to meet later this week on. We wanted to go ahead and get the approval from the health department. We are somewhat concerned about programming events, public events, using public dollars, and then having some limited seating. But we're going to talk about what events we think we may have, and we'll report back to you in the near future if we proceed with having events there. I need to ask the board's consent. You don't have to make a motion. I really just need head nods. Back on March the 16th, based on the authority that the state gives city administrators, I declared a public health emergency, and that was basically for 120 days. But the renewal of that emergency requires the consent of the board of directors. And I'm asking for your consent to extend that public health emergency for either through August the 18th, which is through the state's public health emergency. We originally drafted it as extending it for 60 days, which would be through September the 7th. You would have a board meeting on September the 8th. Honestly, I would request that you consent to myself extending that for 60 days through September the 7th. I don't think anything's going to change as it relates to COVID-19 between August the 18th and September 7th. If we need to extend it again, we can do that. I can ask for that at the board meeting on September the 8th. So with head nods, I see 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay. And I told you earlier we were working on this issue about the voluntary program, the campaign, sign up, that you would follow the health department guidelines. I hope to have more on that. We'll likely, if we can pull this off, it's likely we're going to start this on the 13th, which is next Monday. So we'll be getting as much information out there as possible, but like I said earlier, there are a couple of hurdles I need to work through before we do that. I appreciate your time tonight. It's a couple of long meetings in the last couple of meetings, and hopefully the consent agenda will help that in the near future. That's all I have. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to speak just really briefly about the item that came up in the public input period tonight. Mr. Jones, he a few weeks ago, he brought his dissatisfaction with our noise ordinance to my attention. And at that time, I invited him. He'd obviously done a lot of research into the subject, and I invited him to share with me his research and any cases that he had, and perhaps if he had any ordinances from other jurisdictions, things that he thought might be more suitable for Siloam Springs, that he could share those with me and take a look at those. He did not do that for whatever reason. I met with him again tonight prior to the meeting, and again extended that invitation to him and invited him to meet with me at his convenience. I don't know if he will be willing to do that, and I'm not willing to go so far as to say that our ordinance is unconstitutional. I will say that it is an older ordinance, hasn't been updated in several years, so like all older ordinances, it could probably benefit from being looked at and updated to bring it up to reflect the recent developments in the law. It's not obviously a board goal or even a parking lot item, but if there is no objection from the board, as time permits, I'll be looking at that, and I'll talk to the police department and code enforcement and our city prosecutor, and just get all the players involved, and we'll look at that, and again, sort of as time permits, and if there does appear to be a need for some updates, we'll be bringing that to the board at some point in the future for your consideration.
Thank you, Jay. All right, we're going to start with Mindy tonight. Bob has the right to, I don't want to skip around, but good, so get to start. I'm sure you got something written down there.
Well, of course I do. It keeps me from wandering all over the place. Fireworks. Hope everybody had a great 4th of July. I posted this on Facebook the other day in response to a citizen who was not very happy with the fireworks. I said, before we voted on this ordinance, I polled over 100 citizens, and I was surprised when the overwhelming majority expressed their support of shooting fireworks within the city. I wasn't a fan of it myself and really thought we would get a lot of pushback, but we didn't at the time. As with every ordinance, it went through 3 readings, which means it was brought before us at 3 different meetings. I vaguely remember 1 or 2 citizens expressing concerns at the time, but the majority of those either didn't seem to care or said that they were in favor. As I was writing that post, I was listening to fireworks all around me. It sounded a bit like a war zone. But I also knew that many were enjoying the opportunity to celebrate our country's freedom in that way. Though they were able to shoot them off since July 1st, really July 4th, at least in my neighborhood, was the most active day. I do feel bad for the pets who are afraid of the noise and the children who can't sleep because of it, but hopefully we can find some grace for those who are finding joy from the activity of shooting fireworks off within the city limits while keeping in mind that it's for a very limited time. Speaking of that time, I would be in favor of reducing the number of days if the rest of the board wants that. I did find out that the other cities' policies in the area include Bella Vista, Bentonville, and Rogers. Let's see. Those limit their fireworks within city limits to July 3rd and 4th. Fayetteville, Pea Ridge, Springdale allow them July 1st through 4th or longer. So if that would help some of the concerns, I know we got a few of concerns expressed, but I also know that people really enjoyed being able to do that. And even though it wasn't my first choice. I was happy that people were happy to be able to do it. So we can talk about that more if we need to. Reed's comments were about wearing the mask. Thank you for those comments. I have just been extremely sad over the last few weeks about the lack of respect people have shown toward each other when it comes to how to handle COVID. People seem to think that this is a good time to ridicule people that wear a mask or shame people that don't. I even saw a post on Facebook the other day that was from someone who said, it's gotten to the point where I know what political party someone is involved in based on whether they wear a mask or not. No, that's not true. That is not a true statement. There are people on both sides that value human life. I would venture to say most people value human life. We just all deal with it differently, and we all have fears different fears related to it. So I do appreciate the comments that Reed made. I know we weren't on the same page as far as the resolution is concerned, but I think you made some very valid points. This is not the time for shaming. This is the time for coming together as best we can and pushing through this disease the best we can. And like I said earlier, with all the options the businesses are offering us, we have choices as to whether or not we want to go into a business that does require a mask or doesn't require a mask. We have a lot of choices. So other than that, I think that's all I have to say. I echo Director Burns' comments about our board goal meeting. I appreciated working with each of you and being able to it sounds like, come up with some pretty good goals in a pretty efficient amount of time. So good for us.
Brad?
Yes, Mayor, I'd request that we review ordinance 19-26 and amend chapter 38. I'd like to thank China for the wild geese that were in my driveway. And if we could do that in the near future before the next celebration, and I'm sure we'll get a bunch of feedback between now and the next meeting, and we'll have a good discussion on that. Maybe wrap that one up by 6:30, or 7:30. That'd be nice. I just want to, it's re-election time, not for me, but for folks on this board, and I don't know what the outcome's that going to be, but I just want to encourage people to understand, in Ward 2, I support the city administrator in the process that we have. We are fiscally responsible. I would encourage folks to go to the city website, go underneath the government tab, and if you'll go underneath that, you'll see divisions, hit finance, and you will find a COVID-19 and utility billing announcement, how we're working with folks on that. The annual budget reports, 2014 to 2018, annual budgets, 2016 to 2020s, the audits, the revisions that we made, and how fiscally responsible we really are. And I just want to remind folks that I support this government that we have at the city of Siloam Springs, and I support the decisions that my fellow board members have made. And I think it's important to get the correct information out to the public and not misinformation. I'm not a fan of that one. And I'd like to thank the city. I got several emails recently, everybody adjusting to COVID, and one was a person with children that didn't like the splash pad hours and gave a great email. I forwarded that to city administrator. Staff made agreed with that person and made the adjustments. I had another one in my ward that had bought a nice RV. Apparently RV sales are up. The trees were poorly trimmed and they didn't want to trash out their new RV, and I forwarded that, and that was taken care of. And they're little things. If you will contact the at-large or your board member, we have a city staff will do everything in their ability to address issues. And then the sanitation hours was another one. And I was up at sanitation today and was able to, I didn't see it operating, but we have our new mulcher up there, and they were getting ready to do what we would call an in-service, or learn more about it and to run some debris through it. And I wasn't on the proper schedule, as a board member. I was not aware, and they luckily took some of my debris and turned it into fine, whatever that's going to end up one day. So I just want to remind folks, city website, we are fiscally responsible. We do have a large reserve. The board does listen, and I just observe Chief Gilbert, thank you for listening to Matt out there. Please have an open ear. And I just got a text, and I will follow up for that person with the PD. And once again, I just encourage folks, contact your board member. Thank you.
Marla?
I also want to bring up fireworks again and discuss it. My neighborhood was shooting them off all the time, which, that's what we allowed them to do. It's just that we need to designate, do they do it in the middle of the street? Do they do it closer to the neighbor's property, or where do they need to? Because we were covered. And we used to sell fireworks. I love fireworks. But we just need to be responsible to our neighbors, and we need to see how we can work through that. I also want to revisit the police cars. I want to let Chief Gilbert know that I was not against purchasing. I think that we need the best, and I'm not a fan of lease options. I figure if the clearinghouse or wherever you buy what's designated, if they're not selling what we need, then we have the right to go purchase it. And I just believe that, after 3 years, I would want to be able to keep that vehicle. And I just, that was just why I voted no. I don't like leases. And I just feel like it'd be more fiscally responsible to buy something we can hang on to. I want to thank the Planning Commission for their work on the church thing tonight, even though, we have disagreements. It's just, that's how it is. And nobody's right or wrong. We're discussing, and then we come up with our opinion or what we want to say to the public or how we want to vote. And I want to say to the people in the community, contact us. I have sent several things to the administrator, city administrator. He forwards it to the different departments, and things get done. And if that's how we want to operate, we can't do that unless you let us know what needs to be done. And so I would love to hear from you. And my business is ready for a mask poster. We're all wearing masks while we're working and asking for people to come in with a mask. We are not a food establishment, but we are around food, and we just feel like it's a courtesy and a respect for others. And so we're doing that. And we have been feeding several other communities through the Manna Center. And I just want to express how thankful I am that we live in a community that cares about not just our citizens, but the surrounding communities when they're in need. We have food, we give it out. We don't care where they're from. If they need it, we're going to give it to them. And we've been blessed to be able to do that during this COVID. And I just want to thank the citizens for allowing us to be able to share what we have, share our bounty with others.
I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I've never received so many texts and phone calls than I have on the fireworks. And Coleman and I are the ones that ask for it to be changed. And I still stand by that because I do like that people are celebrating our nation's history. I mean, we've had fireworks from the beginning. Let's continue that. And I'm not a fireworks person. I don't shoot off fireworks. I don't go see fireworks. But I support those that do because it is a celebration of our nation. And so the number one complaint I had was giving respect to your neighbors. There was trash left on the streets, trash left in neighbors' yards. one lady that got a hold of me was irate because she went on vacation, came back, and her pool was covered in fireworks. And so I don't know how we solve that for next year or for New Year's Eve, because that might happen in New Year's. But I do think that we need to look at it and see if there's anything we can do. Because, I mean, it's great that we can celebrate, but let's be respectful of our neighbors. And then the other thing, I love what Mindy and Brad had to say and Reed. One of the things, I have not experienced the mass shaming thing. I have experienced wonderful things from our community regarding the COVID-19 and respecting my family and knowing the situation we're in. And people have been very kind, understanding that we don't take Aubrey out to certain places. And so it's sad for me to hear that people are experiencing that, but one of the reasons I might not be experiencing it is because I've decided to take a break from Facebook. And it has been a blessing in my life. Because this nation, the turmoil that we're in, it can depress a person. And even if I disagree with someone, I sure hope that they don't feel shamed by me. I hope that they understand that we can agree to disagree. And that's one of the things I appreciate about, like, the discussion tonight, is we agree to disagree. And I've enjoyed, just like the meeting, the workshop we did for the goals. And so it made me sad to hear that. But I do appreciate those in the community that have taken steps to protect me and my family. Thank you.
Well, I'll chime in on the fireworks, because I had misunderstood the ordinance, and I was getting after my neighbors for shooting things up into the trees and what have you like this. And I voiced my opinion probably louder than I should have, and I called Philip, and he set me straight on what it was. So I had to go back and apologize to my neighbors, and then the next morning I apologized to them again, had them come out and visited about it, and everything is great. And but I will say this: I don't think they have I'm not going to say they don't have a clue. I don't think they're doing it because they're celebrating our country. They're just doing it because they can make noise. I'm going to disagree on that one. I think the majority of the people are just blowing it up because they can blow up stuff. And I don't know whether the fireworks people, Kevin, you may know this or not, did they develop some new fireworks this year that didn't have a lot of aerial, but were just the noisiest compression type fireworks that I've ever heard? I mean, I was sitting in my shop one day, one went off, and I jumped. And do what? I know, but I'd never heard them in town before. But well, no, trust me, we've had fireworks in town before. It's just not been illegal. They've been here. But Kathy even came out to the shop to check on me because she said I was worried about you, and my heart was still beating. That's how bad it was. But and I've got two of those dogs. One of them that is just, I'm not sure he's still overcome with this, and that's something we just have to live with, I guess. And but it's sad. But I will say this, in all fairness, I've heard hardly any after the 5th. Whereas in the past, when we didn't have this ordinance, we were still hearing them for a week. Bang! I mean, and so I applaud those who had them. Maybe they knew they had a day to get rid of them, and it was okay to do it, so they went out and got them out of their system. I don't know what it is, but knock on wood, that was good. Reed, I appreciate your thoughtfulness and your crafting your response to the mask thing, and I respect you for that, and always will. And you wear a mask, I know that, and I appreciate you for the way you handled it without emotion, other than passion. Passion and emotion are not necessarily always the same thing. So, thank you, and all the board tonight. Appreciate everyone getting along, and it's getting late, and I got to go to the bathroom, so I'm going to pass this on to Reed.
just want to say that I've had opportunity to speak with and be around a few of the employees of the city, various departments the past few weeks, and I'm really pleased to see the pride that the employees of the city are showing. Pride in their work. They feel like they're valued. And I think that's a mark of a good city, good community. And I'll applaud Philip on that, but I'm sure he can pass that down to whomever he needs to. But I'm glad to see it, and I look forward to a great future here in this community. Thank you.
Carol?
I'm wondering if I dreamt this or if I actually saw it in the paper, but I thought we were one of the few cities in Benton County that actually had our sales tax increase. And I thought it increased by 7%, where some of the others had gone down. So I'm very pleased that the COVID did not hurt us that bad, maybe. I don't know how we're going to come out later, but would this be for March? Because I thought
April. Should be
Pardon?
April.
April?
April, yeah.
Okay. So
It would
so
be
we
for
were
April,
in the
yes.
midst of the COVID. Okay.
Just
So-
for that note, I haven't announced it because we haven't seen all the sales tax numbers yet, just our local.
Yeah.
But we're going to probably wait at least another month to see where we stand and how the impact is. But it's not nearly as great as we thought it was going to be, at least to date.
Right. Well, I'm sorry I jumped the gun, but I was so happy to see that. And I'm going to talk about fireworks a little bit too, because I got some calls, I got some texts. But one of the things, and I don't particularly care for fireworks, but that doesn't mean other people do. And they are celebrating whatever, whether they're celebrating our freedom, independence, but they were having a good time. And my neighborhood had the most beautiful displays. What I'm upset about is that there are a lot of pet owners that don't put their pets up during the 4th, and there are a lot of missing pets or pets that have been found that nobody's claiming. So that is where my heart is with the pets that had to suffer through all of that, when all their owner had to do to help alleviate a little bit is put them in the house, put them in a garage, put them in a storage. Maybe it's too hot in the garage. It's been pretty hot. So, but if they could just take care of their pets, I would like that. This was a tremendous meeting today. We had so much good discussion. That's what this government is all about. That's what I enjoy about this, that we all have our own thoughts, ideas, and insights, but we all get along and we respect each other. And if we could get the nation to do that, we would be so good. So thank you, and I really appreciate your comments too. Thank you.
Mr. Bob.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate the support for our resolution for our police department. We probably ought to start working on one now for the fire department and the EMT, so nobody gets their feelings hurt. And they all deserve it. Trust me. They one is just as deserving as the other. Fireworks. I'm not sure what that one thing is that goes off. Kevin, maybe you know. It's a little bit like the main deck gun on the battleship Missouri. Because I've got a pretty sturdy house. It hadn't been built that long ago, and it rattled the windows. And so maybe as we take another look at this ordinance, we may have some restrictions we want on sellers as opposed to just the deals. And Mr. Brad, there's a lot of those all over South Elm Street. I can tell you that. And I thing that bothers me the most in all this mess that's going on, I'm about ready to throw all my TVs out in the backyard, is all this negative stuff. I get so much of it. And it reminded me of a poem that Philip and I shared our remembrance of. It's not long. I want to read it to you. It says, I watched them tear a building down, a gang of men in a busy town. With a mighty heave and a lusty yell, they swung a beam and a side wall fell. I said to the foreman, are these men as skilled as the men you'd hire if you had to build? He gave a laugh and said, no, indeed. Just a common labor is all I need. And I can wreck in a day or two what it took the builder a year to do. And I thought to myself as I went on my way, just which of these roles have I tried to play? Am I a builder who works with skill and care, building up others by the rule and square? Or am I a wrecker as I walk the town, content with the labor of tearing down? And I get to think of that, and there's just so much negativity. And I think if there's anything we can do as a board member, yes, we encourage people to let us know what's going on in their life and let them know what we can do about it and do something about it. Try to help them so that they don't develop a negative attitude about our city government or things of that nature. And it just pains me that those things happen. I am thankful, though, that I'm in a position in this city where I can maybe help some of them out and do something about it. I heard a comment, one more comment for you today. Somebody said a gentleman told him what we suffer from the most these days is an overabundance of a lack of encouragement. And I had to stop and think about that for a minute. An overabundance of a lack of encouragement. And I got to thinking about that. Yeah, that's really true, and it's a shame. We need to work real hard to change that. Mr. Mayor, pursuant to the procedures and organizational matters of the Board of Directors, I would like to request an executive session of the board be placed on the agenda for the board meeting of the 21st of July for the purpose of discussing the employment of the city administrator. If there's no further business, I would make a motion that we adjourn.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, nay. We are adjourned. Good night, all.